So hey guys. Welcome back to the channel. This is part 1. What if Naruto was neglected and trained by all ninetails beast users? And also, he got harem with multiple women, but before I start, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and check out the description box for the next part. Now let's start the story. Chapter 1. A new start. Naruto looked around the small village he and Naughty Sensei had just entered. Like most of the villages he had been to the Fire Country, the buildings were all made out of a mixture of wood and bricks and were modeled in a Western style with flat rooftops and square architecture. Most of the buildings were shops that sold various wares and goods, which was obvious when Naruto observed the numerous people that were milling around looking in the windows. It had only been about a week since Naruto had left with Jiraiya on this training trip, and the two had already been in 2 other cities in the Fire Country. So what are we going to be doing here, Naughty Senin? Naruto asked as he looked up at the larger male. Jiraiya was a fairly tall man, standing at about 6'5", making him taller than most of the people in Konoha, with the exception of Kakashi. He had white hair that spiked up before going down to about mid-back. It was held in place by a Hidia-8 with 2 horns and the kanji for oil on it. He was wearing a green guy under a red vest and had wooden Jetta sandals rather than the standard shinobi sandals. Jiraiya looked down at his student and scowled. What have I told you about respecting your elders, Gaki? Naruto shrugged. You'll get my respect when I feel you've earned it. So far all you've done is go to lady houses or peek at women, and I have yet to actually learn anything from you. Jiraiya sighed at his student's rather apathetic attitude. Ever since they had left Konoha, Naruto had changed. He had become a lot quieter than the loud mouth the Sennin had met during the Chunin exams. In fact, he hadn't spoken more than a few words since they left Konoha. It was like the loud mouth had suddenly vacated the boy's head and this new person took his place. Most of the time Naruto stared at nothing and seemed to be in deep thought. Jiraiya was not sure what was bothering his apprentice, but figured that he would find out what was wrong in time. Alright, the Toad Sennin sighed. I have to meet a contact here who has some valuable information for me. After this is done I'll begin training you. How does that sound? Naruto nodded. That's fine. Jiraiya frowned at his godson's lack of enthusiasm, but left it alone for now as he headed off. Naruto walked around the town, not really bothering to pay attention to where he was going at the moment. Truth was he had been thinking a lot, mostly about himself and how he had not really taken his training seriously. When he was in the academy he had been more concerned with playing pranks to get attention, which had seriously hampered his ability to learn. Of course, half of the problem was that by the time he had found a teacher willing to actually teach him rather than try to sabotage his training, Naruto was so far ingrained in his pranking and loudmouth tendencies that it had simply become a habit. He shook his head and sighed. Despite that, it still wasn't an excuse for not bothering to learn when he was able to. That he actually applied himself to learn what he could, he may have been able to keep Sasuke from leaving the village. There was another of his problems. Sasuke Uchiha had been someone he had considered a brother. He had always thought that even with the small rivalry they had going, that they were still friends and always would be. That feeling had been dashed when Sasuke plunged Chidori's into his chest, not once but twice. Naruto was no longer sure if he could keep his promise to Sakura by returning the boy, not that it would matter anyways. Naruto was beginning to doubt that Sasuke would ever willingly return. Even if Naruto forced him to come back, he doubted Team 7 would ever be the same. Naruto shook his head of the morbid thoughts. Now wasn't the time to be dwelling on such things. Sasuke's defection had opened Naruto's eyes to the reality of his situation. He needed to get stronger. He had to train and try his hardest to become a real shinobi, not the loud brat who could not even bring back someone he considered a brother. As he was now, Naruto was lacking in every aspect of being a shinobi. Sure, he had the Rasengan, spiraling sphere, and Kage Bushin's shadow clones, but that was really it. In every battle he had fought so far, if it were not for the Kyuubi, Naruto knew he would have died. During the battle on the bridge, in the Nami no Kuni, Land of Waves, he had used it to fight Haku. During his fight with Orochimaru in the Forest of Death, he had been forced to use it. His fight with Gaara, his fight with Sasuke, every major battle he had been in he had used it. Add on that he could not even use the Rasengan without the aid of a clone. He did not have proper control of his chakra and no set Taijutsu style, or rather he just swung until he hit something. Naruto knew he had a lot of problems to fix. Looking up, he found himself standing in front of a store that appeared to sell shinobi clothing. Naruto looked at his own attire. His bright orange tracksuit had been with him for as long as he could remember, not because he wanted to wear it. No, despite the fact that orange was his favorite color and was good for getting attention, the only reason he wore it was because it was the only thing he could afford. All the stores in Konoha had blacklisted him, making it nearly impossible to get a decent set of clothing. Hell, the only food he could even afford was ramen, which was why he ate it all the time. Even these clothes he had were costly, the man who sold them to him making him pay 3 times the price most people would spend for normal clothes. Deciding that if he wanted to become a real shinobi he should look like a real shinobi, Naruto walked into the store. The shop itself was fairly standard, there were many racks in the store with different styles of shinobi clothes in various colors. There was also a few areas that sold weapons, most of which were the standard kunai, shuriken, ninja wire and basic sealing scroll. Unlike Konoha, this was not a ninja village, so they did not have any specialty clothing and weapons. Naruto began to walk around the store to see what he might like. He looked at various forms of pants first. He wanted them to be in a dark color. Looking at a few of the different styles and colors he decided to buy several sets of dark blue cargo-styled pants. They had several pockets that looked like they were designed to hold various scrolls and were of a sturdy material that would not wear down. The next thing he went to were the shirts. Looking through them he went with a dark blue and black colors. Buying several sets of both sleeveless and long-sleeved shirts so that he would have some variety before he moved on, looking to see if there was anything else he might want. He eventually bought several other things, a pair of black fingerless gloves with metal plates on the back, a pair of black combat boots with steel two tips and a sealing scroll, so he could carry it all. Walking up to the cash register which had an old man sitting at it, Naruto set the clothes down. The old man looked at him and began to tally up the price. "That's quite a lot of stuff you bought, young man, the total will come up to 4,000 yen. Naruto reached into his pants pocket and pulled out Gama-chan, his frog wallet. Opening it up he looked to see how much he had. It was not well known, but Naruto was, despite not looking like it, was very stingy when it came to money. Living on the streets and having to be careful where he bought stuff and how much he bought, Naruto had been taught the value of cash. Right now he had 6,500 yen, he would be using about 2/3 of his savings, but in Naruto's eyes it was worth it. Taking out the necessary amount, Naruto gave it to the old man. "Excuse me, but do you have a place I could change?" Naruto asked, using a more respectful voice than he ever had before. "Yes, right over there," the old man pointed to a small changing stall that was somewhat hidden in the corner. "Thanks," Naruto replied, moving over to the stall. "No problem, young man." Naruto went into the stall and changed, opting to go for the sleeveless shirt instead of a long sleeve one right now. He looked himself over in the mirror and nodded in satisfaction, sealing the rest of his clothes inside of the scroll he bought. Walking out of the store, Naruto created a cage bushin and told it to go find Jiraiya and tell him he was going to get some food. Walking around, Naruto eventually found a small stand that seemed to offer a variety of different foods. Naruto eventually settled on donburi with giant beef and began to eat. A few minutes later Naruto blinked as the memories of his clone finding Jiraiya drunk off his ass with several girls hanging off the man hit him. What was that? Naruto wondered as he tried to figure out what had just happened. He had never had that happen when he made a clone before. Of course, normally when he made clones, he would spam them out as if they were going out of style, so maybe he just never noticed. As he ate, he absently wondered if this could be used for training or if he only retained the memories of the clones when they dispelled. He would ask Jiraiya when the man found him. A little while later the man walked into the stand and sat down next to him. He ordered a small bowl of ramen and waited for it to come. When it did he began eating for a bit before deciding to speak. "We'll be staying the night here, tomorrow we're going to leave early and start your training." Naruto nodded. "Speaking of training, I noticed that I gained the memory of my clone when it dispelled." "Ho ho," Jiraiya said with a small hint of surprise and pride, "so you found out the secrets of the cage bushin, eh?" Naruto turned to face Jiraiya with an incredulous look. "So you knew about this?" "Of course I knew, kid," Jiraiya snorted. "I've been waiting to see when you would figure it out yourself." Naruto nodded again, deciding not to bother getting bent out of shape about not being told. "Do you think I would be able to use it for training?" Jiraiya looked thoughtful for a moment. "That could work with your reserves, you could easily learn things in months that many others would take years to get down. Though I imagine there would be some drawbacks to this method of training." "Like what?" Naruto asked. Jiraiya spent the next hour explaining the drawbacks of using cage bushin to train. 1 month later. Naruto grunted as he came up and did another set of push-ups. He had been going at them for about an hour now and was just about finished. It had been a month since he had learned the cage bushin method and Naruto's training had been progressing far faster than most people could ever hope to. Every day Naruto would create about 200 clones, half of them would go through the taijutsu kata that Jiraiya was trying to teach him. The style was called Hamagutori no Ken, hummingbird style, and relied on high-speed attacks that were designed to inflict significant damage on the weak spots of the body, such as joints. The other half would work on chakra control, which was easily Naruto's worst subject, with ninjutsu being a close second. Naruto had been told by Jiraiya that because of his massive reserves, doing things like jinjutsu and medical jutsu would be impossible. However, if he got his control up, Naruto should at the very least be able to dispel high-level jinjutsu, even if he could not cast them. So his clones would do a mixture of exercises, most of them would run around on a body of water with several large rocks, sticking to different areas of the body, while balancing Senbon or kunai on his fingers. He hoped that he could at least get Anbu level chakra control by the end of the training trip. While his clones were doing that, Naruto would work on the physical aspect, training his body to withstand high-speed combat. Every morning Naruto would wake up and do his workout. Currently he would do a 15-mile run, 400 push-ups, 400 sit-ups, 200 pull-ups, 1000 squats, 500 kicks and 500 punches. Each week he would add 5 miles and 100 more of each exercise. He had gotten inspiration for the training regimen from his friend Rock Lee, a boy who could only use taijutsu. While Naruto was considered an ninjutsu specialist, he had strong hopes that he could also match Lee and Guy in taijutsu. Finishing his push-ups, Naruto started on his sit-ups. A little ways away, Jiraiya watched his apprentice work with a frown. While he was proud of the boy for pushing himself so hard, he was also worried. Naruto had been doing nothing but training for the entire month they had started. The boy would only stop to eat and sleep, though Jiraiya was positive the boy was only getting half as much sleep as he should. Jiraiya's original decision to take Naruto on this training trip was to focus on helping him use Kyuubi's chakra, but with the boy had been adamant on learning to fight without it, that Jiraiya had decided to focus on actual shinobi training before going to that. While the blonde had improved a good deal, going from mid-genin to about high chunin level, he would eventually crash if he kept at it. "Naruto." Jiraiya called out, "I want you to stop for a second and come here." Naruto looked up and nodded. Finishing his set, he stood and made his way towards Jiraiya. "What do you need, Jiraiya-sensei?" That was another thing that was different about their relationship. Whenever they were training, Naruto would always refer to him as sensei. Of course, once they were finished it was right back to Iro-senin, but at least it was progress. "I want to know what's eating you," Jiraiya said, narrowing his eyes as Naruto looked away. "I don't know what you're talking about, sensei," Naruto said, though he still wouldn't make eye contact. "Don't give me that crap," Jiraiya scowled. "You've been quiet ever since we left Konoha. In fact, you haven't been your typical loudmouth self since you got out of the hospital. Now that I think about it, I've rarely ever heard you speak more than 2 words unless it was about training. Now spill it or I won't train you anymore." Naruto winced at the obvious threat. For a moment he was silent before he sat down with a sigh. "It's just I realize just how badly I've handicapped myself all this time. When I was younger no one would ever teach me anything. I had to learn to read and write on my own because the lady who owned the orphanage said demons don't deserve to learn how to do human things, and when I went to the academy it was the same way. I thought that since the old man was letting me go there, I would finally be able to learn and show everyone what an awesome ninja I could be if given the chance." Naruto closed his eyes. "That never happened. I was always sent out during important lessons or assignments. When they taught us taijutsu I was taught incorrect stances. The list for the things they did go on, I eventually decided to stop paying attention. I played pranks so people would notice me. And by the time I found someone who was willing to teach me it was too late. I didn't care anymore. Sure, I always said I would be Hokage, but I never really worked at it. I want to change that." Jiraiya sighed as he realized what the problem was. He should have known that Sarutobi-sensei would not have been able to protect the boy like he should have. Jiraiya should have been far more adamant more about taking Naruto with him after the Kyuubi's attack. He was sure that a life on the move would have been better than a life of hatred. "I suppose I can understand that," Jiraiya said, "but you're still going to burn out if you keep this up." "I know," Naruto sighed, "but I can't help it. I want to become better. I don't want to be considered the dope, the loser anymore." The Toad Sennin looked at his godson for a long while before a smile broke out on his face. "Alright then, get back to your training, and I'll make sure you become the best shinobi in Konoha if not the entire elemental nations." Naruto grinned before running back to his spot where he began exercising again. As soon as Naruto and Jiraiya entered the next town, the Toad Sennin immediately turned to Naruto. "Listen, I'm going to go and find one of my contacts here so I can look for some information. You can wander around, just stay out of trouble, got it?" he asked. Naruto rolled his eyes at the man. "I'm not Unagi-sensei." Jiraiya rolled his eyes at the new nickname. Apparently Naruto had decided that because Jiraiya had earned his respect, he would give him the sensei title. Of course he later told the man that because he was still a pervert, he would not be removing the Iro part anytime soon. "I'll be fine, I'll just go and see if this place has any ramen, maybe do some training afterwards." "Whatever, brat," Jiraiya stated as he ran off. Naruto, having been with the pervert for the last month, recognized that the man was heading towards the red lights district. "Informant my ass," Naruto mumbled as he began walking around town. He didn't really bother taking in the sights. Having seen one city in Fire Country, he noticed that they all kind of looked the same. Instead he looked around at all the people. Even though he had been out of Konoha for over a month, actually having people smile at him rather than glare was a novel experience. He still was not really sure how to react, but he would occasionally return someone's smile with a tentative one of his own. As he was wandering, he noticed something else that made him curious. He had passed several groups of girls his own age and not want to be rude to, well, anyone really, he had offered them a smile. This had the unexpected side effect of the girls doing two things. The first was for the girls to blush at him, the second was to huddle in whatever group they were in and start giggling while looking at him. He really was not sure how to react to this, having never had experience with girls. Aside from getting his face to cave in whenever Sakura hit him, he had not even touched a member of the opposite naughty things before. He did not count Tsunade-chan, Shizune-chan or Ayame-chan, at least not without bodily harm done to him. And so he was left confused as he made his way around town, looking for a stand that would sell him some good ramen. After several minutes of searching, he finally found a stand that looked promising. He walked in and sat down at one of the stools. At the sound of his entrance, the chef turned around and spotted him. "What do you have, kid?" Naruto frowned as he looked over the menu. "I'll have 5 orders of your miso ramen, 4 orders of your chicken ramen, and 2 orders of your beef ramen to start." The man behind the counter just looked at him for a second, wondering if this kid had some kind of mental deficiency. Are you sure you can eat that much, kid?" he asked. Naruto looked at him with his newly created "Do you know who the fuck you're talking to" look. "Of course I'm sure, if I wasn't I wouldn't have ordered it." The man just looked at him before shrugging. "Well, if you say so." 1 hour and 23 bowls of ramen later, Naruto left the stand, leaving a very happy ramen chef and a feeling of his wallet several pounds lighter. He decided to continue his walk through the city before finding a nice quiet place to train. He wasn't too worried about getting lost. Jiraiya somehow always knew how to find him, even when the man was drunk as a skunk. As he continued, Naruto noticed he was getting more and more of those looks from the female population. He was not sure what they meant, but the looks had the odd effect of making him swell with pride and at the same time want to run away screaming. Though, he could have sworn he had seen those looks before. He shrugged the thought off as he looked at some of the stores, wanting to see if they may have anything interesting. He didn't go into any of the stores right now, since he could not see anything interesting. Instead, he satisfied himself with window shopping to see if there is something he might want. As he was looking into one of the stores, he felt someone tapping him on the shoulder. Turning around, he found himself staring at a girl around his age. She had long light brown hair, green eyes and a decent figure for someone who he recognized as a civilian. She was giving him the same smile with that light redness across the cheeks that he had noticed other girls giving him as he had walked around the city. Naruto was really not sure what to say. He had next to no experience with women, so he was completely unsure what to do. He decided to be quieter than he usually was. After all, Sakura would hit him when he was loud, so there was no reason to assume other females would not do that either. "Can I help you?" he asked. He picked up several giggles coming from behind the girl. Turning his head slightly, he saw a group of them just a little ways away looking at the two of them. He did not know why, but this instantly had his danger senses going haywire, telling him to run and never look back. The girl continued to give him a small smile. "Actually, me and my friends were just wondering if you wanted to go shopping with us." Naruto blinked, opened his mouth, closed his mouth and blinked again. No one had ever asked him to do something like this with them before. It went without saying that he was stumped on what to do. "What?" he asked in a voice that sounded like he had not heard what the girl had asked. The girl talking to him could not help but think he looked extremely cute with his confused look. She started giggling again. "I asked if you wanted to go shopping with us." Naruto, for reasons he did not know, felt his cheeks become inflamed and he was positive he looked like a tomato. This was confirmed when the girl and her friends in the distance started giggling again. Naruto thought the giggling was kind of cute, yet at the same time felt it was the single most terrifying thing in existence. He was tempted to just run and hope these girls could not find him again to ask him, yet at the same time he had never actually spent time with anyone his own age outside of the academy and missions. "Sure, I'd love to with you," Naruto said as he gave the girl his megawatt smile. After all, it would be nice to hang out with people his own age, just to be with them instead of on a mission or training. That was the wrong thing to say. Naruto was unsure what had happened, but he soon found himself being dragged by the arm to nearly every store in the city. The girls did not do any shopping, however they had decided to see what kind of clothes he liked to see them in. Apparently they wanted a guy's opinion or something. He wasn't quite sure since they were talking so fast it was next to impossible to understand them. In any case, every store they went to, the girls would grab a bunch of clothes, change into them and model for him while asking for his opinion. Naruto, having never done anything even remotely like this before, was completely unsure what to say to them. Instead, he found himself spending that time blushing and trying to speak, only for no words to actually come out, or for his words to sound more like he was choking on a piece of food. Unfortunately for him, rather than irritate them, this seemed to endear the group of females he was hanging out with even further. They began calling him cute and asking him things like if he had a girlfriend. One was even bold enough to ask if she could touch his whiskers. Luckily help arrived, as he was walking down the street, two of the girls having somehow latched onto each of his arms, Naruto noticed a large dust cloud being kicked up and coming his way. He and the girls stopped and watched as Jiraiya passed with a horde of barely clothed women coming at him with bats, pitchforks and many other devices used to maim and cripple, all the while yelling about perverts and getting what he deserved. As soon as they passed, Naruto got out of the girl's grip and turned to them, sorry for cutting this short, but it looks like I have to save my perverted sensei from his rightful execution. With nary another word, Naruto was gone, leaving the girls to watch the second, smaller cloud of dust he made. Naruto found Jiraiya just as he assumed he would have, lying unconscious and twitching as the women walked away after beating him. Walking up the blonde to the spastically twitching toad Sennin, a second later, said Sennin jumped up and dusted himself off, as if nothing had even happened. I knew you weren't going to be meeting any contact naughty sensei, Naruto said once the man was up, stupid pervert, why can't you ever just act normal? Normal is overrated, Gaki, Jiraiya exclaimed as a smirk formed on his face. Besides, you have no right to talk, I saw all those females you were with. I have to say I'm quite impressed. His smirk turned into a lecherous grin as he saw Naruto's face turn beet red. It's not like that, you goddamn pervert. Naruto shouted, pointing a finger at his sensei. They asked me to go shopping with them and I was just trying to be nice. Oh ho, so they came on to you, eh? Jiraiya wiped away a fake tear. My student is growing up so fast to have women asking him to spend with them. Shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up. Naruto shouted, covering his ears. Now don't be like that, Gaki, Jiraiya said with a grin, it's quite impressive what you did. In fact, I'm so impressed that I'm going to give you some tips on how to please women. As the two went to the hotel Jiraiya had rented before deciding to do his research, Naruto was forced to listen to his sensei, giving him tips on how to please a woman. He tried not to listen to the man, knowing that all he was talking about was some perverted crap that he did not want to know, however he somehow found himself listening anyways. Half of it he didn't even understand, having been sent out of class during the naughty things education course. He did not actually know about naughty things. Even his infamous Orochi no Jutsu, naughty things jutsu, was merely the byproduct of having seen the front cover of Icha Icha when he caught Ajusen reading it several times. Jiraiya had finished talking by the time they reached their room, and Naruto, being Naruto, used his way with words to form a comprehensible and well thought out sentence after listening. What the hell are you talking about, naughty sensei? What in the hell is a pussy? Is that like a cat? Cause I seriously hate cats. Naruto shivered as he remembered his horrendous times with Tora. Jiraiya looked at Naruto as if he had sprouted wings and grown several tails. Are you telling me you've never heard that word? Shouldn't you know this stuff? Kami, I thought they would have taught at least a little naughty things education in the academy. Naruto blinked. I think they did mention something about it once. He frowned as he tried to remember if they had a class on that. And you didn't listen? Jiraiya asked, sounding for all the world frustrated. The kid had been getting a lot better at being a ninja, he acted smarter too. Jiraiya was sure the boy was not as dumb as he acted or used to act to a certain extent. But about other things he was still an idiot about. Naruto looked down at his feet. Well, I would have, but I didn't have Iruka as a teacher back then. They sent me out, telling me that because of my pranks the other day, I didn't deserve to know about this. Jiraiya found himself frowning. He had learned a while ago that because many of the teachers had been biased against Naruto due to the fox, that they would often send him out during important lessons in class. It was part of the reason Naruto had next to no knowledge about being a shinobi. What about your Orochi no Jutsu? Jiraiya asked, how did you come up with that if you had no knowledge of naughty things education? Oh that, Naruto said in a dismissive tone, I saw Ajusen reading that perverted book of yours and saw the cover, I got the idea from that. But the girl in the front cover isn't naked, Jiraiya said. Naruto tilted his head to the side, neither is mine, what do you think that smoke covering is for? Jiraiya found himself feeling stupid as he heard that. He had assumed that the smoke covering had been used to tantalize the person Naruto used it on into wanting more. Apparently from what Naruto was saying that was not the case, and the only reason the smoke was there was because Naruto did not know enough about female anatomy to actually create those parts. This meant that his apprentice knew next to nothing about naughty things, or the opposite naughty things. It was both fortunate and unfortunate that Naruto happened to be with a man who made his living off of books that were little better than porn. Alright Naruto, Jiraiya said as he pulled out his first edition of Icha Icha Volume 1, I'm going to be teaching you all you need to know about women. As soon as Naruto saw the little orange book he knew he had to escape, he shot towards the window, hoping to make a quick exit. However, Jiraiya was far faster than he was. Before the blonde even knew what was happening, he found himself being tied to a chair and trying not to stare or listen to his sensei as he talked about naughty things and used his perverted book as a reference. His screams and pleas could be heard all throughout the night. The next day found Naruto at the library, looking up knowledge on females and naughty things. He had been forced to listen to his damn sensei for more than half of the night, now he felt like he had been scarred for life. However, the Toad Senin's talk had also made him curious. Jiraiya had told him a lot, but he also felt that the man had left a lot out. After all, he had only focused on the perverted parts about naughty things. So here Naruto was, along with several clones, reading books on human anatomy, the reproductive system and intimate relationships in general. He had even gotten a few romance novels, hoping it would help him understand more about women and relationships with the opposite naughty things in general. After all, there was no way he was going to let his sensei corrupt him with his perverted ways. 6 months later. Naruto grunted as he was kicked in the face and sent flying backwards. Flipping himself in mid-air, Naruto landed on his feet and skidded across the water. In burst of speed, Naruto shot off towards Jiraiya, one hand going to his kunai pouch, and the other began a series of one-handed seals. He threw several shuriken at Jiraiya before thrusting out his palm. Gyuuten. Repusho. Wind release. Wind gale palm. The shuriken, which had already been going forward at high speeds, soon became a nothing more than a streak of silver as they head for Jiraiya. The Toad Senin jumped out of the way, knowing how dangerous Naruto was when he used his wind element for anything. However, Naruto knew his sensei would dodge. After all, Jiraiya was not a cage-level shinobi for nothing, and had in fact counted on him dodging. Naruto put in a small but intense burst of highly concentrated chakra into his legs, literally disappearing and reappearing right in front of Jiraiya. The blonde shinobi aimed a punch at his sensei's solar plexus. Jiraiya swatted it to the side and downward in the hopes of knocking Naruto off balance. No such luck, as Naruto went down and pushed himself into a handstand, launching a kick that managed to hit Jiraiya in the face and make the man stumble back. Pushing himself into a flip, Naruto went for an axe kick to Jiraiya's collarbone. Jiraiya put up both arms to guard and immediately regretted it as he was forced to a knee. God damn Gaki and his stupid strength training. Jiraiya grabbed onto Naruto's legs with both hands and was about to flip the boy over. However, Naruto used his other leg to jump up and over Jiraiya, using the man's grip to keep himself balanced, and launched a kick to the white-haired man's face. Jiraiya was forced to let go of Naruto's leg as he tilted his head to the side and dodged the kick. He turned around and managed to kick Naruto in the chest on the blonde's way down, said boy moving with a blow and going into a series of flips as he jumped away to gain some distance. Jiraiya took out a kunai and threw it at the blonde, going through a few hand seals as he shouted. Ninpu. Kunai Kage Bushin no Jutsu. Ninja Art. Kunai Shadow Clone Jutsu. One kunai multiplied into 24 kunai as they all headed straight for Naruto, said blonde just looked at them with a smirk. Going through a few of his own hand seals before Naruto called out his jutsu. Suiten. Suijin Heki. Water release. Water encampment wall. A large wall of water formed around Naruto, blocking the kunai. Once Naruto heard the popping of kunai being dispelled and he went through several more hand seals. Suiten. Seryuiden no Jutsu. Water release. Water dragon jutsu. The wall of water soon began to swirl around Naruto before taking the shape of a 60-foot water dragon with glowing yellow eyes. As soon as it did, Naruto created a Kage Bushin seamlessly and had it go through a few hand seals as the water dragon launched itself towards Jiraiya. Gyuuten. Renkiden. Wind release. Wind bullet. The clone smashed a fist into its stomach and shot a large ball of compressed wind out of its mouth. It went straight for the water dragon. The water dragon's power and speed were soon increased as the Renkiden merged with it as it headed towards Jiraiya, said Senin, swearing enough to make a sailor blush as he jumped out of the way. The water dragon made slammed into the water with a loud crash. Water erupted everywhere, looking something akin to a large explosion. Using the distraction caused by his jutsu, Naruto threw several kunai and went through the hand signs Jiraiya had used earlier. Ninpu. Kunai Kage Bushin no Jutsu. Ninja Art. Kunai Shadow Clone Jutsu. One kunai became 41 kunai as they headed for the still airborne Jiraiya. Noticing the kunai, the Toad Senin went through his own hand seals to counter. Ninpu. Hari Jizu. Ninja Art. Underworld Guardian Spikes. Jiraiya's hair wrapped around his body and became hard as steel as it deflected the kunai. When all the kunai were gone, Jiraiya whipped his still long hair around and called out another jutsu. Ninpu. Ki Senbon. Ninja Art. Hair Senbon. Several hardened needles of hair were launched at Naruto, who took out 2 kunai. Spinning them by the rings, he went into his taijutsu stance, with both kunai held in a cross guard. Naruto's hand soon became a blur of motion as he deflected the hair senbon away. Whatever he couldn't deflect was dodged as Naruto flipped and twirled in an amazing acrobatic display. When the senbon hailstorm died down, Naruto looked around, not seeing Jiraiya anywhere. He frowned before closing his eyes, trying to sense out the man's chakra. Having felt Jiraiya's chakra signature for 6 months now, Naruto could pick it up fairly easily. He finally found him, however his eyes widened when he realized the man was right under him. This realization came too late as Jiraiya came out of the water and smashed a fist right into Naruto's chin. Before Naruto could fly too far, he felt hair wrap around his body and harden immobilizing him. Jiraiya grinned at his student who was currently hanging upside down. The boy had come quite far in just 6 months. His physical abilities and taijutsu were now extremely impressive, definitely high Jonin level with all the work they had been doing to bring it up to snuff. His chakra control was also coming along nicely, being at around mid-Jonin level, which was good, especially considering the fact that it grew at a near constant rate. However, it was Naruto's ninjutsu that took the biggest leap, particularly in the field of elemental manipulation. Jiraiya had decided that since the boy was doing so well they would get started on learning elemental nature manipulation, something that Jiraiya had planned on having Kakashi teach the kid when they returned. Now he was glad that he didn't go through with that plan, since Naruto appeared to have 3 elements, Fuetin, wind, Suitin, water, and Raiten, lightning. It had been a shocking discovery, and Jiraiya had to wonder if it was some kind of bloodline, or if it just came from his parents. Minato had been a Fuetin user starting out, but had later learned to use Raiten during the Third Great Ninja War. And Kushina had an affinity for Suitin jutsu, so he supposed it was possible, but it still didn't make much sense. He actually planned on having Naruto tested when they returned to Konoha in 3 years. If he did have a Kekkei Genkai of some kind it could cause problems. Jiraiya shook his head. He would worry about that later. Nice job Gaki, but you're still too early to beat me. Naruto gave Jiraiya a pout before it turned into a grin that instantly put the Sennin on guard. Oh really? Naruto asked right as Jiraiya's eyes widened. Shit. Jiraiya jumped out of the way just in time to dodge a large explosion as the now identified cage bushin he was holding blew itself up. As Jiraiya landed he felt cold steel against his neck. He couldn't help but chuckle. You've been waiting to use that tactic, haven't you? Naruto grinned as he put his kunai away. Well yeah, you tend to immobilize me a lot with those hair techniques of yours, so I figured it would be a good way to beat you. Jiraiya nodded as they had sparred quite often. By now it was obvious that Naruto would know Jiraiya's tactics. That was going to be an issue since others would not fight like he did, nor would they pull their punches. He would need to have Naruto gain some experience. Maybe he could see if Tsunade would give them some missions to accomplish. You're getting better, Jiraiya complimented as he thought about how to give Naruto some real-life experience. Anyways, let's set up camp for the night. Tomorrow we'll head into a town a little ways off. Alright Naughty-sensei, Naruto said as he grabbed several scrolls from his kunai pouches. The Naughty-sensei, Naruto said as the two sat around a campfire. What is Gaki? He asked as he took some meat off the spit over the fire and began to eat. I was wondering, Naruto started as he ate some of his own food, do you think that it's possible for me to bring Sasuke back? Jiraiya sighed. He had expected this to come up soon. Naruto had recently been getting quiet and contemplative again, which had not happened since the first month of their training. He also knew about the kid's promise, that pink-haired girl who the kid had a crush on, though judging by the amount of times he had caught Naruto talking and even flirting with other girls now, he was sure that crush would be gone soon. He resisted the urge to give a perverted giggle at that thought before speaking. I'll be honest with you Naruto, even if you brought Sasuke back, it would only cause more problems. Sasuke is like Orochimaru in many ways, he desires power and will do anything he can to get it. I don't need to remind you of how he had nearly killed you trying to leave for that traitor. If you brought Sasuke back it would just cause him to resent you and Konoha more. He left because he felt that the village and his friendship with you was holding him back. If you did succeed in forcing him back, he would only hate you more for trying to block him from gaining power. Naruto's shoulders slumped. So you're saying I should forget about him? Jiraiya patted the boy on the shoulder. I know it's hard, hell when I tried to bring Orochimaru back and failed, I was just as hurt as you were. But being a shinobi, and especially if you want to be Hokage, means that you sometimes have to make hard decisions. Naruto nodded to himself. It had been on his mind a lot recently. He had a feeling that this would be the case, but had wanted a second opinion. He didn't like it. He had wanted to bring his best friend back, but if that was not possible, it would be better to forget about him. I understand, Naruto said with some conviction. I was wondering, do you think we could extend the training trip? Jiraiya blinked in surprise as he answered, well, I don't see why not. Jiraiya smiled at the thought of all the things he could teach Naruto if they stayed longer. I had originally planned for a 4-year trip anyway. This will allow me to teach you much more, and with your Kage Bushin, you could easily be Kage level by the time we return to Konoha. Naruto grinned as he finished eating and threw the stick his food was on away. He felt as if a small weight had been lifted off of him. Before Naruto went to sleep he made a vow that he would train to become the greatest shinobi ever. Naruto sighed as he looked at the blank piece of paper in front of him and wondered how he got roped into doing this. I can't believe I let Iro Sennin somehow convinced me to write a book, he thought with a sigh as he remembered the bet he had made with his perverted sensei. Flashback. Naruto and Jiraiya were currently arguing again. Many people would probably wonder what the two could be arguing about. The answer was quite simple. Jiraiya had just been caught peeping again, and because Naruto needed his sensei to teach him, he had ended up bailing the fool out again. This was the 1,700,560th time that Naruto had been forced to do this, and he was getting sick of it. Sweet Kaminari-sensei, can you for just once in your life not go peeping in the hot spring and act like a pervert? Naruto yelled in the middle of the heavily populated city in Tsuki no Kuni, Land of Fangs. SHHH, Jiraiya whispered as he looked around, seeing many of the women currently glaring at him. Keep it down, brat, you're gonna make it harder for me to do my research if you yell like that and alert all the ladies. But maybe if they don't go to the hot springs you won't go peeping, Naruto stated. Then perhaps you can actually write a good book that's not perverted. Hey, are you saying my books are bad? Did I stutter? You damn brat, my books are the best, and everyone with half a brain knows it. Then how come all the women absolutely hate your books? Asked Naruto, who grinned when he got a glare from his sensei. Besides, I could write a book that would sell 1,000 times more copies than your perverted crap. Ho ho. That's a good one, Gaki, would you care to bet on that? What are the wages? Jiraiya went into a thinking pose, and if I win you will not only have to keep helping me out when I get caught doing research, but also use your Roki no Jutsu, naughty thingsy jutsu, to help give me some material as well. Fine, and if I win you have to not only stop being perverted as long as you're still training me, but also. Naruto thought about what else he wanted for a moment before giving a smile that sent shivers down Jiraiya's spine. Tell me about my father. Jiraiya nearly choked on his own spit when he heard that. He had in all honesty been planning on telling him after his training was complete. Telling him at this stage could be detrimental, since his father had many enemies. Right now Naruto was only at low to mid jonin, since shadow clones could not be used for physical training, and he lacked experience. Not only that, but Naruto might get angry at his father and end up hating the man for sealing Kyuubi inside of him. On the other hand, it could prove to be beneficial and give Naruto something of a measuring stick, making him push himself harder in order to surpass his father. Though he was already pushing himself far more than others could. Jiraiya sighed as he figured it couldn't hurt. Alright brat, you've got yourself a bet, Jiraiya said, holding out his hand. If your book ends up selling more than mine, I'll stop peeping until your training is over and tell you about your father. Naruto grinned as he took Jiraiya's hand. This would be no problem. Flashback end. Damn, this is harder than I thought, Naruto mumbled to himself. Having fun, brat? Naruto turned to see Jiraiya grinning at him. Naruto favored him with a glare but said nothing, which only caused Jiraiya to grin more. Moving to look over his student's shoulder, he decided to push the blonde shinobi's buttons. My Naruto, look at all that writing you have done, Jiraiya said with evident sarcasm. I'm sure you'll have a book that beats mine in no time with such A-grade material. Shut up, Naruto growled. Not as easy as it looks, is it? Asked Jiraiya in a taunting tone. Naruto abruptly stood up and left, not looking back as he heard his sensei laughing. Naruto sighed as he slammed the now empty bottle of sake on the table before ordering another. Sake had become something he found he enjoyed drinking, especially since he couldn't get drunk and just enjoy its taste thanks to the Kyuubi. Hey there, handsome, do you mind if I join you? Naruto looked up to see a woman standing in front of him. She was about 5'6" and wearing a red and black kimono. She had a fairly nice hourglass figure with nice curves and firm round watermelon. She had black hair and emerald green eyes, as well as pale milky skin. All in all, Naruto found the woman to be very beautiful. Naruto grinned at her, pleased with the small compliment she had given him. He had of course been called handsome before by other women he had interacted with, but it was still good to hear. Naruto had changed a lot since leaving a year ago. At 13 years old, he now stood at a height of 5'7", having hit a rather spontaneous growth spurt about 6 months ago, about a month after he and Jiraiya left on this training trip. His body was also more defined, even with the civilian clothing he was currently wearing. It was rather easy to see the strain denoting to his well-defined pectoral muscles, abdominal muscles and arms. His face had chiseled out as well, having lost most of his baby fat with his harsh training, giving it a masculine look. Add on the whiskers, and he had what many girls had described as roguish good looks mixed in with feral naughty things appeal. How could I possibly refuse such a beautiful woman's company? Naruto asked rhetorically with a charming smile. The woman smiled at him as he ordered a drink for her while she sat down. Thank you, it's hard to find good company these days, she said, looking around at the various tables. Naruto looked around too and realized what she meant. Everywhere he looked, men were eyeing her with lust. I see what you mean, he started before giving her a sly look. Though I do hope that you're not just using me as a shield, Naruto affected a mock-hurt expression. The woman giggled slightly. Of course not, she started before pausing in thought. Well, not completely, you seem like decent company. I'm quite good at detecting gentlemen who would actually be able to hold a conversation without looking below my face. That seems like quite a talent to have, Naruto said as he favored her with his patented foxy grin. A beautiful woman such as yourself must be used to sensing perverts rather easily. Naruto and the young woman talked for about an hour. Mostly he would ask her questions about herself, while regaling her with the things he had seen on his travels, being careful to leave out his status as a ninja. He learned her name was Aiko Miyake, and much to his surprise, she lived in Yuki no Kuni, Snow Country, one of the countries he had saved which was now called Hara no Kuni, Spring Country. She was apparently here on business working as a trader for some of Hera's technology, which Naruto knew was more advanced than anything else in the elemental countries. Naruto would also throw in the occasional subtle compliment that made the young woman blush. He was quite pleased with himself for that accomplishment. Since his first encounter with that group of girls a little over 6 months ago, Naruto had made an effort to get better at speaking with women. He would never go to Jiraiya for advice of course, after that night where the Sennin had tried to teach him, Naruto had been scarred for life. However, he had read up on intimate and naughty sexual relations, as well as books that talked about girls in general and several romance novels. He never really liked them, but felt they helped. As he continued meeting different women in the elemental nations, Naruto found himself actually enjoying spending time and flirting with various women. He could at least partially understand Naruto-sensei's obsession with them, even if he felt the man took it too far with his peeping. Aiko herself was pleased that Naruto was actually listened to her. She found herself blushing many times as Naruto used his charm and gave her subtle compliments, and not just about her figure. It was definitely a pleasant change to people either putting her down for doing what some considered a man's job or only trying to get in her pants. It also helped that she was downing more sake than usual since she felt so comfortable in his presence. When it was time to go, Naruto noticed that she was having a little trouble standing up. She had obviously drunken too much. Deciding to do the gentlemanly thing, he offered her support as he took her back to her hotel. Of course, nothing ever goes right when you're with a young beautiful woman at night, and the two soon found themselves surrounded by several thugs. "Look what we have here, boys," one of the thugs exclaimed. "That's quite the woman you have there, boy, too much woman for a scrawny thing like you," another commented. "Just hand over the woman and all your valuables, and we may let you leave," the one on his right stated as he pulled out a knife. Aiko, well drunk, was sober enough to realize the danger she was in and pressed herself against Naruto. Naruto just sighed. What was it with all thugs being arrogant fools? Deciding to be quick, he created a shadow clone to keep Aiko standing while he launched himself at the thugs. He appeared right in front of the first thug and hit him square in the solar plexus with enough force to send him flying down the road, breaking a few ribs in the process. The other thugs looked in surprise before it turned to anger, and they charged him. The one with the knife tried to stab him, but Naruto deftly moved out the way and grabbed the man's arm, hitting it right where the elbow joint was, breaking it. Ignoring the man's scream of pain, he spun 180 degrees and launched snap kick at the other man's left kneecap, breaking that before hitting the man in the neck, knocking him unconscious. When that was done, he moved over to the young woman who was looking at him with something akin to awe, respect and lust. "Are you alright?" Naruto asked as he walked up to the woman. "Of course I am, thanks to you," she purred out as she grabbed his arm and pressed it into the valley of her breast. Naruto tried hard to ignore that as he walked to the hotel she gave him directions to and walked her to her room. "Thank you for escorting me, Naruto-kun," Aiko said. Naruto grinned as he scratched the back of his head. It was nothing really, I was just doing the right thing." Aiko gave him a coy and seductive smile as she leaned into him, wrapping her arms around his neck and pulling him close. I think such behavior deserves a reward," she said. Naruto shivered as her breath hit his lips and found himself getting rather stiff in his lower region. "What kind of His question was cut off. Aiko pressed her lips against his. For several seconds Naruto found himself frozen stiff. Well, he had kissed women before, it was always him to initiate it. Thankfully, instincts began to take over as he started kissing back. As Aiko moaned into the kiss, Naruto licked her lips asking permission to enter. When she opened her mouth to grant him entrance and he tentatively probed her mouth. Wrapping his arms around Aiko, he became more emboldened as she moaned into his kiss. Naruto soon found himself in Aiko's room, pressing the beautiful young woman against the wall as their kissing became more impassioned. Aiko moaned as Naruto brought his mouth away from hers and began to lick, nip and bite her neck. The young woman began to pant as she grabbed fistfuls of his hair and started to grind herself against Naruto's increasing bulge. It wasn't long after that they found themselves on her bed, where both of them eventually lost their clothes. Not that either cared at this point, as passion and lust had taken an inexplicable hold over the pair. Naruto had one last thought before he completely succumbed to his growing lust. "Thank Kami, I learned an anti-pregnancy jutsu from that medical book." Naruto held in a groan as the light from the window hit his eyes. Opening them slowly, he realized that he was in an unfamiliar room. He nearly panicked before he started to think rationally. Last night was fairly hazy, and the last thing he remembered was escorting Aiko to her apartment. It was then he heard a content sigh and felt something trying to burrow its way deeper into his well-muscled chest. Looking down he saw a mop of messy black hair. That's when he remembered last night. He couldn't help but blush at remember what had happened after Aiko had kissed him. They had found themselves giving into the feelings of passion. He remembered having naughty things with a young woman for 4 hours straight before they had pretty much passed out in her bed, as well as all the positions they had done it in. Naruto was actually surprised with himself, not just the fact that he had been deflowered, but also that he had lasted so long, though he was also quite proud of himself. The blonde had been curious about naughty things for a while, ever since he created Izuroki no Jutsu actually, and when he left to go on the training trip, he had decided that this was his chance to learn. Of course he didn't want to go to Jiraiya knowing the pervert would completely corrupt him, so he did the only thing he could. He picked up multiple books and read. One of the things he read was that most men do not last long, especially their first time. Though Naruto always did have high stamina, so maybe it was just brought over to his naughty things drive. He heard a groan as Aiko stirred in his arms before lifting her head up and rubbing her eyes. "Good morning Aiko-chan," Naruto said, hoping that he would not get beaten for what happened. Sometimes women could become violent and she had been drunk, so she might not even remember last night. Aiko looked at him and for a moment Naruto was afraid he was going to be on the receiving end of the female fist of fury. However she just gave him a saucy smile. "Good morning to you too Naruto-kun, I hope you enjoyed last night." Naruto gave an internal sigh of relief as he grinned at her. "I had a very good time last night. I hope that you enjoyed it as well." Naruto's answer was a steaming kiss on the lips, which soon turned into a small makeout session. It lasted for a while before Naruto realized he had to go or Jiraiya might start searching for him, and the last thing he needed was that pervert to see this. Deciding to thank her for the amazing night he had several clones clean her sheets while he cooked her breakfast. The breakfast itself was fairly simple, eggs, bacon and French toast with a side of orange juice. Aiko however loved it, stating that it was the most delicious breakfast she ever had. One of the things Naruto had learned recently was how to cook. He found it was something he loved doing and was really good at blending spices and food. What he would consider a normal meal for him was apparently something that tasted like Kami had blessed it for others. When breakfast was over Naruto thanked her again and gave her another intimate kiss before making his way to his own hotel. When Naruto got in he noticed that Jiraiya was passed out on his futon and several sake bottles littered the floor. Naruto however ignored this as he went to his blank sheets of paper and began writing. Last night had strangely enough done wonders to clear his head. He found that he had several ideas for a story and so he began writing. He idly wondered if having naughty things was the cause of his clear mind or if it was something else. Humming a little tune he began to write. When the war of the beasts brings about the world's end. The goddess descends from the sky. Wings of light and dark spread afar. She guides us to bliss, her gift everlasting. 2 months later. "I can't believe," Jiraiya mumbled as he cried in I'm tears. "Believe it naughty sensei, you lost," Naruto stated with a shit-eating grin. But. No buts," Naruto wagged his finger at the depressed Toad Sage. Naruto's book had just been published a little over a week ago. Naruto had titled it Loveless and brought it to Jiraiya's publisher. After looking at what Naruto had written the publisher had decided to put the book on the market. The results had shocked both Jiraiya and Naruto. Within the first few days the book had swept across the elemental nations by storm, beating out all 3 Icha books in sales, and was still getting more popular. Jiraiya looked at the sales his student's book got and couldn't help but feel depressed. Naruto's book had earned a higher sales rate than his own books. Not only that, but there was not one mention of smutty goodness in it. It was inconceivable. Impossible. And yet here it was right in front of him. "Come on you pervy old man, deal's a deal." Jiraiya looked at him before he grumbled about never betting against blonde gakis who are too talented for their own good again as he handed him a scroll. Naruto looked at the scroll before looking back at Jiraiya with an eyebrow raised in question. "It's from your father, in case something ever happened to him. I was told to give this to you when I felt you were ready," Jiraiya explained. That was all Naruto needed as he opened the scroll and began to read its contents. After the first few sentences Naruto's emotions started to slip. His lips quivered and tears ran down his eyes as what he had suspected for a while now was confirmed. He didn't know whether to be happy, sad, angry or elated. Jiraiya watched his student's face flash through various emotions and became worried when the blonde's face became blank. It was the look Naruto would get when they were sparring and showed none of what he was feeling. Naruto?" Jiraiya asked in an unsure voice. He was not used to these kinds of things. Despite having been through 2 great wars, Jiraiya had always had a problem at helping others with their emotional problems. He himself always preferred to get smashed and find a woman to have naughty things with. Suffice to say he didn't think that would work for Naruto. A small crack appeared in Naruto's facade. "I'm going to the hotel. I need to be alone for a while." Naruto left rather quickly. Jiraiya looked up at the sky and sighed. He was not sure if this was the best idea, but only time would tell. Naruto sat in his room as he reread the message his father had left him. Dear Naruto. I bet you're wondering who this is, nah? My name is Minato Namikaze, and I went by many names. The Konoha no Kiroi Senku, Yellow Flash of Konoha, and Yondaime Hokage were a few, but the one I am most proud of is father. Specifically your father, your old man's pretty cool, right? Now onto why I am writing this, it's really a just in case kind of thing. Despite winning the war, there are many people out there who want me dead, and I'm not arrogant enough to assume that one might not get lucky. I am leaving this letter with Jiraiya, my sensei and your godfather. Should anything happen to me or your mom Kushina, he is the one who will take care of you. I told him to give this to you when he feels you're ready. Now that the boring stuff is over with, I have some things to give you that I felt were too important to keep at home. On the bottom of this letter is a seal that is specifically designed to open with Namikaze blood, meaning only myself or you can open it, seeing as how we are the only Namikazes. Inside this seal you will several important things, the first being one of my Hiraishin kunai. Note that these will not work for you because of a specific blood seal that is tied to me and only me. The Hiraishin is simply too powerful a tool to use without taking great precaution to ensure it does not get replicated, but this should be a good basis for you to make your own Shiki formula, for your own Hiraishin is the key to the formula created, without it you won't be able to see all the seals on the kunai. The last and just as important are my notes on the Hiraishin. They are not complete since I figured that if you're anything like me you will want a challenge, but they should give you a basis to start with. If I die, I hope that this letter lets you know that I love you and hope that this can in some way bring us closer as father and son. Love your father. Minato Namikaze. Naruto gritted his teeth as he tried to stop the tears from coming, but it was no use and he soon found himself crying. It was both in joy and in anger. Joy at knowing he had a father who cared about enough to come up with a precaution in case something happened to him, to ensure that he would be able to protect himself and let him know that his father did in fact love him. And anger at the fact that it was his father, the man he had considered a hero since he was little and listened to Ajisan tell stories of him, was the same man who condemned him to a life of hell and loneliness for 12 years of his life. He was always pretty cautious when it came to you. Naruto turned around to see Jiraiya leaning in the doorway, his arms crossed and a rare serious expression on his face. What? Naruto asked as if he had not heard what the man had said. He made that for you the moment he found out Kushina was pregnant. Jiraiya continued sitting down on the edge of the bed. I don't think I've ever seen him or Kushina as happy as they had been when they heard she was going to have a baby. So I should just forgive and forget? Naruto asked in a low voice, just move on like that because he was happy I was being born. I've lived in loneliness and pain for 12 years of my life because my own father sealed a giant 9-tailed demon fox in my gut. Maybe you can forgive something like that so easily, but I can't, godfather. Jiraiya winced at the way Naruto said the man's title. Jiraiya knew he had not been much of a godfather to the blonde. He could have disobeyed his sensei and the council, taking Naruto with him and nurturing the boy into the man he should have been, but he had not done that. Naruto, I wanted to tea. And where were you? Naruto accused, having cut off Jiraiya's speech. You were supposed to take care of me should anything happen to my parents. Where were you when the orphanage kicked me out and I was forced to live on the streets for a year? Where were you when I received my first beating by the villagers on my own birthday? Naruto Lokai. What were you doing, huh? Peeking on women so you could write those perverted book of yours and not accept the responsibility for your godson. Look here. Jiraiya yelled as he stood up and narrowed his eyes at Naruto. I wanted to take you with me. In fact, I begged Sarutobi-sensei to let me take you away from the village. I pleaded with him, but he wouldn't budge. He said he wanted you to gain bonds with the people of the village. I told him that it would never happen, but he wouldn't listen. Jiraiya took a deep breath and calmed down. Sitting back down, he placed a hand on the young boy's shoulder. If it had been my choice, I would have taken you with me, but it wasn't. And it's not like I didn't come to see how you were doing. What do you mean? Naruto asked, having calmed down a bit, though tears were still falling freely down his face. Who do you think gave you that wallet? Jiraiya asked, gesturing towards the seal on Naruto's leg that held Gama-chan. Naruto blinked. You gave it to me? But I thought that it was Sarutobi-sensei. Jiraiya shook his head. Had it been him, he would have given it in person. Why didn't you give it to me in person? The council, Jiraiya sighed. By the time I came back to visit you and saw how shitty your life was, I begged sensei to again let me take you out of the village. However, the council had taken much of the Hokage's power after Minato's death. By that time, sensei was unable to do anything. I was ordered not to make contact with you unless it had something to do with the seal. Naruto rubbed his eyes with his arms, getting the tears out before he looked at Jiraiya with a smile. I guess I'll have to fix that when I become Hokage, nah? Jiraiya chuckled as he ruffled Naruto's hair. I guess so, but you won't become Hokage by moping about like this. Naruto chuckled as he dried the last of his tears. He honestly felt better after crying a bit. but crying never got people anywhere, plus crying over spilt milk wasn't his style. He was just about to comment when he remembered something. What about my mother? From what I understand she wrote a letter for you as well, but it's at their house in Konoha, Jiraiya answered. Naruto nodded, then I won't worry about that for now, I'll be able to read it when I get home. Jiraiya nodded and smiled, good now if you're done moping we have some training to do. Naruto grinned, right. 3 months later. Naruto looked out at all the clones he had created after finishing his physical training regime. He had gone from 200 to 300 and had them working on various things. Most of which were elemental manipulation, more specifically trying to find a way to combine them. He had just mastered his lightning element just a month ago, with it being the last natural affinity he had, so he had gone on to try something harder. Currently he had 100 clones working on sub-elemental creation. Contrary to popular belief, sub-elements were not the result of a bloodline. While there were of course elemental bloodlines, they usually centered around specific techniques, such as Haku's Hijutsu Maku Haushu, demonic ice mirrors. There were also bloodlines that had specific powers that were used through sub-elements, such as Hashirima Senju's ability to tame the Biju. Otherwise the shinobi he ran into in Yuki would never have had the Hyoten Jutsu, ice techniques, that they had been known for before it became Hara no Keiyu and Ice Spring Country, after Team 7 saved it. Even though they only manipulated pre-existing ice, it still took the ability to combine water and wind elements to form the shapes they wanted. Anyone with enough control over their two elements and sufficient chakra control could create sub-elements, of course, and were harder than others. Naruto had even heard rumors that there was a person who could use Yoten, lava release, which was a combination of fire and earth elements. And Futen, boil release, which was combining two contradictory elements, fire and water to create an acidic base that could melt a person's opponents. He was unsure how the Kekkei Genkai worked for that person, but he assumed it allowed for a subconscious act of coating the walls of the throat with a layer of protective chakra. So far Naruto had only been able to create Hyoten, but he was hoping to see if he could combine more than just WND and water. Another 100 were working on a mix of Tai and Kinjutsu katas after Naruto had decided it would be good to learn how to use a weapon other than kunai and shuriken. Despite not having any style to go off of right now, Jiraiya had told him he was pretty good with a sword. It was Naruto's hope that he would be able to create his own style, like his Taijutsu style which he had learned was his father's style. The Kinjutsu relied on high-speed combat. Rather than aim for joints, nerves and delivering bone-crushing blows, this style was designed to kill, going for the 8 vital points in the human body. Its movement was also based off of his affinity with wind and water. The style was meant to flow, so to speak. The user would move like the water, flowing in and out of attacks like water flows around a rock. However, it was also fast and unpredictable like the wind. It could be calm and centered one moment, then have all the power and fury of a raging hurricane the next. Right now the sword he was using was one he had custom made when he and Jiraiya had gone to Tetsu no Kuni, Iron Country, a country which had been considered autonomous for many years and was well known for their powerful samurai force. The blade was a total of 2.6 in length, making it a Kadachi class weapon, with a pitch black finish, while the edge was a vibrant silver color. The guard was that of the Uzumaki swirl, made to look like it was made of 9 foxtails in a dark orange color. The handle was also wrapped up in a dark orange cloth, with a gold pommel at the end and 3 tassels on the bottom. The sword was made out of the powerful chakra-conducting metal that was found only in Tetsu no Kuni. It was the same metal that allowed that nation's samurai to launch chakra-based attacks from the blade. It was also very expensive to have made. Along the edge of the blade were several powerful and hidden seal arrays of Naruto's own design. Their purpose was to store elemental chakra, so he could launch elemental attacks, rather than the standard chakra attacks, to give him an edge in battle. He also gave the sword what he called a chakra circulatory seal. What this did was give the sword its very own chakra system, complete with artificial tenketsu points that were bonded to Naruto's own chakra coils. This allowed Naruto to utilize more power if the seals ran out of chakra in battle. It was based off of the few things he had heard about on the Samehada, a semi-sentient blade that could absorb foreign chakra. Though Naruto's was not semi-sentient, it was connected to Naruto in a way that most swordsmen would never be with their swords. He had given it the name Susanoo, god of storms. The last 100 clones were doing a variety of different things, most of which were reading. Naruto had found an immense desire to learn after wanting to change himself. He would read anything from tactics and shinobi history to politics and gardening, not limiting himself to just shinobi-related subjects. However, other clones were doing things like playing shogi to help work on strategy, jotting down notes on ideas for a new jutsu or seal, or even trying to create a new seal. Though those ones had to be replenished often as they usually had rather explosive results. Naruto turned his attention back to the notes in his hand. It was the one thing he had continued to have troubles with, and the one thing he refused to use Kage Bushin to help recreate it all. Of course it was also a very linear technique, so creating a bunch of clones would be next to useless for this jutsu. It was the one thing that he was striving to recreate, the prized jutsu that had made his father feared throughout the elemental nations and earned him his title. The Flying Thunder God or Hiraishin. Unfortunately for Naruto, his father had left very few notes on just what exactly the Hiraishin was. The notes were vague, adhering to describing what the jutsu did, but not tell him much on how it was created. What he did know was that through the means of a Shiki formula and the use of his father's infamous tri-pronged kunai, Minato was able to utilize a space-time ninjutsu that allowed instantaneous teleportation. Naruto assumed the principle behind the technique was similar to the Kuchius no Jutsu, summoning jutsu, in that it revolved around space-time manipulation. So far Naruto had only made a minuscule amount of progress in the jutsu, since he had nothing to go off of except a description on what it did and the kunai with the Shiki, though he was using a summoning array to start as a basis. Hey Naruto, it's time to pack up. Naruto looked up to see Jiraiya waving at him. Standing up, he made his way over to his sensei. We're leaving? Naruto asked as he created a kage bushin and dispelled it, letting his other clones know to dispel themselves in groups of 10 every 5 minutes. Yep. Jiraiya said with a smirk, it's been about a year, and I think the only thing you're really missing is experience. Naruto blinked, so we're going somewhere I can gain experience. Jiraiya looked at him and grinned, not us, you. Jiraiya had sent a message a while ago about giving Naruto a long-term mission to help him gain experience, and he had just received a reply. Kiri, Mist, was apparently still locked in a civil war with Kekkei Genkai on one side and the Mizukage on the other. Mei Terumi, the apparent leader of the bloodline side, had petitioned Konoha for help, hoping that their love of bloodlines would give her some support. Normally Konoha had a policy of non-aggression and keeping out of international affairs that did not involve them, however, with Jiraiya's recommendation that Naruto needed to experience some things, Tsunade had hesitantly given this mission. Me? Naruto asked in confusion, he was unsure what Jiraiya meant by that. Where will you be? I have some business to take care. Tsunade assigned me a covert operation to gather info on the different hidden villages to see which ones are a threat to Konoha and find out more on Akatsuki. It will be easier for me to sneak around without you, no offense, but while you're a damn good fighter you can't speak for shit. Hey. Naruto pouted, puffing up his cheeks comically, I was able to paint the Hokage monument in broad daylight and not get caught until I was done. I think that shows how skilled I am. Jiraiya chuckled, true, but this is not Konoha I'll be going to, many of these places are most likely not friendly, and a few may kill you for who you look like. Naruto was silent as he thought about that. It was true that he was starting to look more like his father. Each day that passed he grew more and more like the man. No doubt if I were some other country that harbored a grudge against his father were to see him they would send assassins out. Naruto was not stupid anymore, he knew that while he was strong, at least mid to high jonin by now he was far from invincible. He could hold his own well enough against Jiraiya, but even when the man went all out, he held back some so as not to kill Naruto. Others would have no such compunction and would no doubt not hesitate to kill him. It was also as the man said, he lacked the experience to make full use of his abilities, and that could cost him. So where will I be heading? Naruto asked, having decided this would be a good opportunity to see how well he could do against someone other than Jiraiya. The Toad Sennin gave Naruto a mission scroll, you'll be heading to Kiri, which is currently locked in a civil war. Naruto unrolled the scroll and began to read it while Jiraiya spoke, you will assist the bloodline side until the war is over. The rendezvous point is in the scroll, as well as a code word and information about who you will be working with. Naruto nodded as he finished memorizing the information and handed the scroll to Jiraiya, who burnt it with a Kaiten jutsu. I'll contact you via summoning from time to see how you are doing and give you any info that I feel you can use. Make sure you stay safe, okay Gaki? Jiraiya finished. Naruto nodded, don't you worry naughty sensei, I'll do my best. Chapter 2. Bloodline Wars. Naruto readjusted the hood to his cloak as he got off the ship he had gotten passage on, bringing a hand up to his face. He also made sure his face mask was in place to hide his whisker marks before looking around. The port town he was in had definitely seen better days. The ships that would normally be bustling in and out of the port were almost non-existent, with there only being 1 or 2 ships in the dock. Most of the buildings were run down and had rust staining many different areas, making it obvious they either did not have the resources or the people to maintain appearances. The people were even worse off. As Naruto began to walk to the meeting point, he saw more homeless people in this port than he did when Geto had been terrorizing Nami no Kuni, Wave Country. Many of them were sitting off to the sides of the street, begging for money or food, while others were hidden in back alleys and side streets. What was worse was that Naruto could see whole families who were homeless, little children who were even more malnourished than he had been when trying to scrounge a living in the streets of Konoha. Just the sight of seeing how terrible these people had it and knowing there was nothing he could do to help alleviate their pain right now was heartrending for the young man. Out of the corner of his eyes, Naruto saw several figures hopping from the roofs, ninja with the Kurigakur, hidden mist, Hideo 8. He took a moment to watch as several patrols passed by, most likely looking for bloodline rebels and their dissidents. Naruto watched the ninja as they passed, trying to get a feel for their emotional position. Living in the streets, Naruto had picked up the unique ability to detect what others were thinking and feeling to a certain extent, an ability that had saved him from a number of beatings by drunken villagers in the past by allowing him to avoid the more unsavory people who would wish him harm. Many of the faces on the ninjas here were an open book. The blonde was pleased to see that most of them seemed to feel just as bad as he did about the situation. While their faces showed no emotion, their eyes showed too much. It had always been said that the eyes are the gateway to the soul. For people like Naruto, that had never been more true. Their eyes showed guilt and sadness over what was happening here. Small flickers of eye movement as they flicked their eyes over to some of the homeless people showed that they too wanted to help. Naruto knew they most likely couldn't because the Mizukage had more than likely threatened to kill their families. It was strange. Naruto had heard that during the beginning of his reign, the Yonde Mizukage was one of the most compassionate cages. Naruto did not know what would cause him to change so profoundly, however the evidence of the man becoming corrupted was right here for him to see. Naruto did notice a few ninja who seemed to derive some sort of pleasure from watching those around them suffer and assumed they were the more hardliners of the bloodline haters. Naruto stopped walking as his enhanced hearing picked up a stifled sob. Looking around, he noticed a few of the other ninja seemed to notice as well and looked even more guilty. Channeling chakra into his ears, Naruto was able to make out the sound better. Let's see, judging from the pitch of the voice, it's a female around her mid to late teens. The sob sounded pained, and Naruto could also hear fear in it. Having never been one to stand by when someone was in that much pain, Naruto put more chakra into his ears to locate the source of the sound. Walking into a small alley, Naruto looked around. When he was sure no one was following him, Naruto disappeared in a gentle breeze. Reappearing on the roof, the blonde crouched down and activated one of the few jinjutsu he could do. It was more of a jinjutsu-ninjutsu hybrid, much like the standard henge that is taught in the academy. Rather than affect the mind of an opponent, it affects the surroundings of the area. Channeling chakra into the oxygen particles in the air, masking and camouflaging the area around Naruto to make it seem as if there is nothing there, making him invisible to all but the most powerful of cage-level ninjas or those with taijutsu and enhanced senses like those of the Inuzuka clan. It was a technique Naruto had been taught by Iro Sennin, who used whenever he tried to peek on women, though Naruto understood it had many applications in stealth and espionage as well. Making sure he would not be spotted by any of the ninja that were passing on the roofs, Naruto continued on his way towards the sobs, which were now becoming much louder and clearer. Naruto eventually found the source coming from an abandoned warehouse of some kind. There were no ninja that he could see in this area, but he knew that did not mean anything. He looked towards the second-story window, which is where the voice was coming from. Dropping off the building he was on, Naruto quickly moved towards the warehouse. Channeling chakra to his feet, the blonde shinobi walked up the walls to take a peek inside the window. What he saw was something that would haunt and disgust him for a long time to come. Inside was a young woman who couldn't be more than 16 or 17 years of age. She had long dark brown hair, which seemed to be the standard hair color in Kiri, and vibrant green eyes. Her skin was a pale milky smooth color, and she had a figure that Naruto had seen on some of the civilian supermodels that Naughty-sensei was with on occasion. At least the woman's eyes would have been vibrant if it were not for the fear in them and the tears that were flowing out of them freely. Her skin, which would probably have looked perfect and beautiful, was instead black from multiple large bruises that covered most of it from her neck to her legs. Her face had several welts and bruises, no doubt from being hit and smacked multiple times. The obvious source of this woman's fear and pain was right in front of her, a man who looked to be in his mid-30s. He had a medium height and medium build, with black hair and brown eyes. The man was obviously a Kiri shinobi, since the man was still wearing his Hideo 8 on his head, however everything else was gone. The man was completely nude and currently in the process of raping the young woman, judging from the bruising on her, some of which looked several days old. This was not the first time he had done so. Naruto's blood began to boil as he gnashed his teeth together hard enough that the coppery and tangy taste of blood came to the blonde as his gums began to bleed. Naruto had always held a deep-seated respect for women that sometimes bordered on worship. He was not sure what it was about them that made him feel this way, but it was part of the reason he had never raised his hand to Sakura when she would hit him. Sure, Naruto was not a virgin anymore and had in fact slept with several girls in the past year, but he would never do anything unless the woman he was with wanted to. To see some man know a monster doing something like this to an innocent young woman was nearly enough to send him on a killing spree of every shinobi in this village. Closing his eyes, Naruto quickly reined in the impulse and took several deep breaths. Even if he tried to, he would not be strong enough to defeat an entire town of ninja. He could not do anything about them right now. He looked into the window. Well, he may not be able to do anything about this town, but he could at least help this woman. Haha, come on, you know you love it. Karai Masashi laughed as he listened to woman sob and cry. A jonin of Kiri for nearly 10 years, Karai was considered a sick bastard even by his peers. He had become a genin at an early age and had risen through the ranks fairly quickly. It had at one point in time it had been the man's hopes to become a member of the Kiri, no Shinobigatonanan and SHK, 7 swordsmen of the mist, before they had fallen from grace. When they had been disbanded due to the betrayals of nearly all the shinobi in that group except one, he had just opted to find some other way to gain glory. While he had yet to find glory, he had found several ways to entertain himself. He looked down at the young teenage girl he was pounding himself into. Her pleas were like music to his ears. Ah. Did I ever tell you how He was cut off from speaking as a pair of hands wrapped around his head, one covering his mouth and the other on the back. With a quick twist, the hand snapped Karai's neck and let him fall out of the girdle and drop to the floor, revealing Naruto, who was glaring at the corpse, as if hoping it would spontaneously combust. Taking his attention off the now dead shinobi, Naruto looked over at the girl and winced. She looked like she was going into shock, no doubt from seeing someone die. Her eyes were wide and she was starting to hyperventilate. He made to move over to the girl and help treat her wounds, but stopped when she turned her attention to him and began backing away. Please don't hurt me," the girl's voice choked as she continued to back away, despite the fact that she was already pressed against the head of the bed. Please, I don't. Naruto pulled down his hood and face mask to give the girl the most compassionate smile he could muster, despite the sick feeling he had in the pit of his stomach. "Don't worry, I'm not gonna hurt you." The girl looked at him and seemed to calm down a bit. "I just want to help you," Naruto continued as he made slow movements towards her. "Do you do?" she asked as a small flicker of hope appeared in her eyes for a brief moment before vanishing. "How do I know I can trust you?" she asked in a low voice. "You don't," Naruto said, keeping his tone warm and kind. "I have no way of proving to you that I don't mean you any harm. All you can do is choose to trust or not trust that what I say is true. However, I promise you right now that I will help you and take you somewhere safe, where you won't ever have to deal with things like what that man did to you again." The girl looked at him for a second before slowly relaxing. She scooted herself away from the head of the bed and moved to the center of the mattress. Naruto made slow movements towards her to make sure she did not freak out before sitting at the edge of the bed next to her. "I'm going to take out a scroll containing medical supplies to heal you, is that okay?" Naruto asked. He received a cautious nod and slowly reached into his pouch, which had several containment seals that were used to hold his various ninja tools. Pulling out a scroll, Naruto unrolled it on the bed and unsealed the materials. A number of medicinal creams, disinfectant and medical bandages came out of the seal. Naruto had long since realized that he would never be able to use medical jutsu, not just because he was always constantly battling to keep his control at the level it was at due to the constant increase in his reserves, but also because his chakra had traces of the Kyuubis in it. While the minuscule amounts did nothing to him since he has had the fox since birth, they were incredibly toxic to others. Still, that did not mean that he would not do the best he could to make up for his deficiency in this area by becoming adept at the creation of healing ointments and herbology. Naruto picked up one of the tubes containing one of his own personal creations. To make up for his lack of being unable to use healing jutsu, Naruto had long since decided to try and make a healing cream based off of his own abilities of regeneration. Naruto had always known that he healed quickly. Wounds that would take weeks for others to heal were gone in hours, and ones that took months to heal disappeared within a day. Naruto knew this was due to Kyuubi and the seal on his stomach, which channeled the fox's chakra into his body at a constant rate. A little over a month ago, Naruto had been able to replicate that ability to an extent and make a powerful healing cream. Utilizing the art of Fuin Jutsu, sealing art, Naruto had come up with a modified containment seal that was designed to be able to store Kyuubi's chakra. With the use of several powerful purification seals that were designed based off the ones on the Shikifuin, Naruto was able to purify Kyuubi's chakra to the point that it was no longer poisonous to humans. Of course, because of the potency of the chakra, it still had to be given in low doses. Lethal wounds like being impaled or broken bones could not be healed with the maximum amount that could be used on a person, which was about the amount of chakra used to make a standard Bushin Jutsu. But wounds like bruises and small scrapes and cuts were an easy fix for the ointment, which had the chakra that was stored in the seal mixed into it. "I need you lie down while I apply some healing cream to your bruises, can you do that?" Naruto asked in a calming voice. The woman nodded and laid herself down on her back as Naruto uncorked the lid to his ointment. Dabbing a little on his fingers, he lightly rubbed them together so the chakra in the cream would activate. He began to gently rub the medical cream on the girl's stomach, which was the area with the most bruising. The young woman hissed in a bit of pain before the healing effects kicked in, causing her to relax. In a few minutes the large black bruise that had been on her abdomen was gone. Naruto continued applying the cream to the various bruises before moving on to the cuts, using a disinfectant before using the cream. When it was done, the blonde wrapped the larger cuts in bandages, making sure all the wrappings were secured and covered, as he allowed himself to feel a small amount of pride. If he were honest with himself, he had far more respect for healers like Tsunade-bachan, rather than warriors like himself. After all, it was easy to take a life, and far harder to save a life. "Can you stand?" Naruto asked as he held out his hand to the young girl. She hesitated for a moment before taking it and standing. The young woman let out a yelp of pain as she began to fall. Naruto wrapped an arm around her waist and gently lifted her up, while being careful not to touch her bandaged areas. Naruto sighed. Her legs were probably broken. "Would you like me to carry you?" The woman looked at him and bit her lip. It was obvious she still had a distrust of him because of what that Kiri shinobi did, not that Naruto could blame her. He waited patiently for her to answer. You promise you won't do anything?" Naruto smiled. "I promise." The woman closed her eyes as she seemed to come to a decision. When she gave a nod of assent, Naruto reached into his pouch, channeling chakra into one of the seals. He pulled out a large cloak, wrapping it around her to cover her modesty. He gently lifted her up in a bridal carry, making sure her head was resting comfortably on his shoulder. Without hand seals, Naruto created a cage bushin with mental orders to destroy any and all evidence of the three of them ever being here. With a nod to its creator, the clone went to work. The woman in his arms began to nod off as Naruto left through the window, feeling lulled by the comforting and warm aura that the blonde possessed. Before she fell asleep, a stray thought crossed her mind. "I don't even know your name." She looked up at Naruto to see what she now realized were some of the most beautiful blue eyes she had ever seen, as he gave her a soft smile. The last thing she heard before falling asleep was, "It's Naruto." Ao sighed for what felt like the 100th time today, as he waited for the person who was supposed to lend the maid to arrive. Whoever it was extremely late. In the ninja world, this usually meant one of three things: they had gotten caught up in something. This could be caused by anything from simple forgetfulness to getting into a fight with other shinobi, with neither of those being very good. They hadn't even gotten here yet, given the trouble it took to get into Kiri. Their support had been given some leeway in this. Ao had been given a week to stake the place out, with today being the last day. Or the final thing that could have happened, this person had been killed on his way here, either before or after they got here. Crossing his arms, Ao began to tap his fingers at dull rhythm against his arms. This was unbelievable that someone would take this long to get here and not even have the courtesy to send a message. Back in his day, people were prompt about being on time to any important engagements like this. The nudge on his shoulder brought Ao out of his mental ramblings. Looking towards one of the men in his squad who was with him for this assignment, Ao saw him nudge his head. Looking over in the direction indicated, he spotted a man wearing a black cloak that reached down the ground. The hood was up, covering the man's face, with the only thing Ao was able to see being a blue face mask covering the bottom half of the man's face. The odd thing about the man was that he was carrying something in his arms. Judging from the shape and size, it was most likely a person. Ao activated the Byakugan in his left eye, spotting the 3 whisker marks on each cheek. As he used the Dijutsu's X-ray vision, Ao relaxed ever so slightly. Well, this man could be their contact, which had been described by a message Terumi-sama had gotten a while ago. It could also be an impostor. As the cloaked man came closer, Ao stopped him. "You look like you're pretty far from home, son." The figure chuckled. "I was told there are many opportunities in Mizuno-kuni and came to try my luck." The voice sounded younger than he expected, but Ao visibly relaxed as he heard the password. He would still need to be weary, but at least now they could move on. "You're later than I thought you would be," Ao said, watching as the man shifted his attention to the form he was carrying. Now that he was not paying as much attention to their support, he took the time to notice that the figure the man was carrying was a person, a woman to be exact. "Sorry," the man said, "I was held up." Ao sensed the underlying meaning to his words and couldn't help but wince. While most of the people on the Mizukage's side were forced to fight, there were others who were not above committing such atrocious acts. "Well, I suppose it's fine since you're here," Ao began, "still back in my day." Naruto sighed as he set the young woman down on the bed in the medical room of the main base to the rebel faction. He looked over towards Ao and nodded. The two of them soon walked out of the room and made their way down a long hallway with various doors leading to places like storage and living spaces. Now that he was not worried about his charge, Naruto turned his attention to the man who he had met at the port. Ao was a middle-aged man with a patch over his right eye and talismans in his ear with the kanji for Shoyukatama, to hear, on both sides. Naruto was able to spot the rather intricate-looking seal that was hidden within the kanji. Given the chakra Naruto could feel emanating from under the man's eye patch, the blonde assumed he had a transplanted Dijutsu like Kakashi. His hair was a light blue in color and looked similar to Kisame's hair. He was wearing the Kiri Hidia 8 around his head. He was wearing a pair of striped shirt and pants with a green robe over them in the standard hunter nin attire of Kiri. Suddenly they stopped at a door that was at the end of the hallway, and Ao knocked. "Come in." Naruto blinked at the very feminine tone as Ao opened the door and entered with Naruto following right behind. When Naruto entered he saw a woman sitting at a large desk and felt a slight hitch in his breath. During his travels he had seen and been with many beautiful women, out of all those he had seen so far this woman took the cake. The woman was very slender and looked to be in her late 20s to early 30s. With ankle-length auburn hair done up in a herringbone pattern at the back with a top knot tied with a dark blue band and 4 bangs in front of her face, one of which covered her right eye. Her face was perfectly heart-shaped and feminine, yet had the look of a leader who had earned the respect of her people. Her skin was a light milky color that looked soft, smooth and delicate, despite the fact that they were in a war. She wore a long-sleeved dark blue dress that fell just below the knees, it was closed at the front with a zipper and was kept open at the front right side from the waist down. The dress only covered up to the upper part of her arms, leaving slender yet strong-looking shoulders and the lower part of her watermelon, showing off her beautiful D-sized chest. Under that was a mesh shirt that covered a little more of her arms and chest, but still left a good amount of cleavage showing. She also wore shorts in the same color as her dress and mesh leggings that went to her knees. Under that, she was wearing high heels with shin guards instead of sandals. "Darumi-sama," Ao voice interrupted Naruto's thoughts, "this is the support that Konoha was able to send us." The man sounded somewhat disgruntled at only receiving one person for help, but Mei didn't seem to be bothered as she smiled at Naruto. She slowly stood from her desk and walked towards Naruto as she held out her hand. "I would like to thank you for coming to our aid. In all honesty I had not expected to receive much help if any at all, mister." She trailed off, obviously fishing for a name. "Naruto," the blonde said with a smile towards the busty red-headed woman as he shook her hand, "it's a pleasure to meet you, Mei-san." Naruto paused when he noticed Mei looking up and down his form and couldn't help but grin. "I take it you approve of what you see." Naruto felt Ao as well as the 2 Anbu who were in the room stiffen and glare at him, but Mei seemed to ignore it as she favored him with another smile. "I'll tell you if you let me know what you think of me." That seemed to throw the others in the room through a loop. Naruto chuckled, "Let's put it this way, if ever there was a goddess walking this earth I have no doubt that I've just found her." Made her credit only took a light tint of pink to her cheeks as she gave him a favoring grin. "Then you can assume I approve of what I see." She took one last eyeful of him before putting on her business face. "As much as I would love to continue this banter with you, I need to tell you what our situation is and see if I can't give you your first mission." Naruto nodded as his face instantly became blank. "I am at your disposal, Mei-san." Takane Nabata was a middle-aged man with long black hair and coal black eyes, wearing the standard garb of a Kiri Chunin. At the age of 11 he had graduated the academy, killing off the person he had spent his entire time with there, as was the standard graduation exam before the graduation was changed, thanks to Zabuza. Over the years he kept average stats, with an average number of missions. He became a Chunin after his 6th try in Iwa and continued on to become an average ninja. When the bloodline wars started he had stayed with the Mizukage. Well, he did not really care about the sides or killing bloodline bearers, he was loyal and would not betray the Mizukage. Altogether there was nothing special about him, he was a fairly average person. It was that average status that had gotten him and his team killed. His team, which had been comprised of 2 genin, 1 jonin and himself, had been tasked with raiding various towns alongside a group of bandits. Well, he had not liked what they were doing, he had no choice, and it was an easy task. They would let the bandits do all the work and then take their share for allowing it. If the bandits tried to resist, it was their job to kill them and find another group to steal money for them. The group he was with had gone to one of the rendezvous points to collect their pay, only to find out too late that it was an ambush and the bloodline users had disguised themselves and set several traps. Takane had been killed after an hour of torture, giving any and all information he had on himself and whatever he knew about the Mizukage's forces. After they had gotten the information they needed out of him and the Kiri Jonin, he had been killed. Naruto using Shinsei Henge, True Transformation, a jutsu he had created using his SS class Kenjutsu, Forbidden Jutsu, the Orochi no Jutsu, Naughty Thingsy Jutsu, he had created a true transformation. Unlike the standard henge of the academy, which is considered by some to be an ninjutsu-jinjutsu hybrid that creates an illusion over one's form and could easily be dispelled. The Shinsei Henge was a true physical transformation, rather than applying a layer of chakra over the body to create an illusion. This creates a real physical body. Naruto staggered as he made his way up to the main gates of the large base for one of the Mizukage's forces, holding his side which was bleeding as his breath came out in haggard gasps. As he got to the gate, the shinobi in the watchtower spotted him and called down to 2 shinobi who were standing guard inside the gate, which began to open with a creak as one of the guards went to get the commander, while the other came out of the gate and walked in front of him just as he began to stumble. "What happened to you?" The man asked as he slung Takane's arm over his shoulder and helped him up. "The bloodline rebels," Takane gasped out using a bit of wind chakra to cut up his gums, making it look like he had blood coming up from his throat. The commander of the base came just as Takane started explaining. "We were attacked by the bloodline users." Takane bent his head down as he coughed up some blood, mentally applauding himself for his good performance. "How did you escape?" asked the commander, who was looking at him in suspicion. "I managed to fall into AR river." Naruto head began to bob. "Guess they thought I was dead." Letting his eyes close, Takane feigned unconscious as the commander looked him over for a moment. "Get this man to medical. I want him up and about to give a report by tomorrow." The commander ordered as the one who was carrying him and someone else came up on his other side and grabbed his other arm. As they dragged him through the base, they did not notice the small smile on Takane's face. "Alright, he's in," Ao said as he observed the front gates come to a close. "Now we just need to wait for him to open the gates, and we'll begin our mission." This would be one of the first times they actually destroyed an enemy base. They had done many raids on ninja teams and caravans before. But because they lacked the numbers, they had never been able to storm one of the strongholds the Mizukijigura created, mainly because no one could sneak in to disrupt it from the inside. Tenji did not work on the more talented of Jonin, and Yugura had created these bases to be impenetrable from the outside. There were a total of 15 guard towers that were designed to spot enemy ambushes long before they ever got within 100 meters of the place. The walls were sturdy enough that only Terumi-sama could break them with her Yoten Jutsu, meaning someone had to open it from the inside. So upon learning that Naruto could create a solid physical transformation, their leader had immediately made plans to begin infiltrating and destroying enemy bases. They had gotten what intelligence they could, finding out where one of the bases was through capturing a few ninja who were working with bandits and interrogating them. Naruto would turn Shinsei Henge into one of the men and come to the base injured and claim they were attacked. Once he was inside, the boy would need to kill and replace the men on the guard towers near the entrance and open the gate to allow their team through. They would then proceed to capture the commander and take him back to base where he could be thoroughly interrogated. However, this was also a two-point mission for Ao, who was mainly here for the purpose of finding out how skilled the young man who had come here was. Depending on how talented he was, they would be able to make even bolder plans and hopefully end this war faster. Outside, while he trusted Terumi-sama with his life, he was not sure what she was thinking, making plans that hung on the abilities of a kid. Back in his day, people relied on the abilities of senior ninja and entire ninja squads. Not young upstarts. "What should we do if the boy fails?" asked one of his men. "Then we leave, no point in attacking if it will lead to failure," replied Ao. Naruto opened his eyes the moment the door closed. Sitting up in his bed, he looked around. He was obviously in a medical room, if the wounded people in beds were any indication. They had gotten rid of his clothes and given him a standard patient's garb, basically just a white smock. Naruto looked around to make sure none of the other patients were awake before getting up. Dispelling his henge, Naruto's true form came up. Putting the cloak over his head, he was just about to make his way to the door, only for it to open. Acting on pure instinct, Naruto drew a kunai, and the minute the person walked through the door, he appeared right in front of them, thrusting the kunai into the person's neck and inflicting a fatal wound. Before they could hit the ground, Naruto caught the person so they would not make any noise. Only now did he take a look at who it was. The person, a woman, was still alive as she looked at him with wide pained eyes while her hands went up to her throat. Naruto watched in horror as within seconds the woman shuddered and died, her eyes still open. Naruto's face paled as he recognized the person as a doctor. He picked her up and closed the door behind him as quietly as possible so as not to wake the patients. He walked over to his bed and gently set her down, arranging her form so she looked to be sleeping. This was his first kill, or at least the first one in cold blood. He didn't count the man who was raping the woman, as he refused to see such monsters as people. While he had killed before during his trip with Hirosenin, it had been in self-defense. This time he had killed someone simply because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Worse still, he killed a doctor, someone who has devoted their life to healing others. He felt sick to his stomach as he clenched his eyes shut, taking several calming breaths as a few small tears fell out of the corners of his eyes. Reopening them, he shut the woman's eyes and lightly touched her forehead with his own, saying a quick prayer and apology before he left. He still had a mission to do and couldn't afford to be distracted. He could break down later. Placing his sensei's invisibility jutsu over himself, Naruto left the room after making sure the door was locked from the inside and then closing it. He made his way down the hallway of the base, which he knew from the general observations they had taken beforehand that the base had 2 stories. He was on the first and would need to reach the second to get to the guard towers, which were connected to the main building. Naruto jumped onto the ceiling, channeling a small amount of chakra to his feet as several people walked past. Deciding the ceiling was safer anyway, he continued moving on, crawling along the roof as he made his way up the stairs. Once he was on the second floor he dropped back down and continued on the floor, dodging areas that were heavily populated with shinobi. Finding a secluded spot the blonde opened a window and climbed out before closing it so nothing would seem amiss should someone come by. Looking over Naruto found he was right next to one of the towers, though he didn't know which one. Moving along the side of the wall he made his way towards this tower. As he got closer he looked at the ground floor and realized with relief that he was next to the gate entrance. Moving into the small tower Naruto walked behind the two people who were looking out at the grounds around the outside of the base. Pulling out two kunai Naruto steeled himself for what he was about to do. The flash of steel later and Naruto was gently setting down two dead ninja. After he had pierced them through the temple, he rolled them over and memorized their features before creating two kage bushin who hinged into the ninja he had killed. Looking at the other two towers next to him, he noticed they were still looking out at the grounds, meaning he hadn't been seen. He sighed in relief before moving over to the second guard tower and repeating the process. With that over Naruto climbed over the wall and walked down onto the ground. Sneaking over to the gate Naruto spotted the two who were standing guard on each side. Using the two kunai he had been working with to make his kills, Naruto took aim and threw them. Both kunai pierced the back of the two ninjas' heads. Before they could hit the ground Naruto created a kage bushin. Both the Narutos appeared next to the dead shinobi and caught them while they were falling. Hiding them off to the side Naruto looked at the winch designed to close and open the gate. Pushing it up the wheels began to turn as the gate opened. Outside of the base Ao and the others had been waiting for something to happen. When doing a stakeout of any kind, it is usually boring and only penetrated with excitement when and if something actually happened. Ninja who specialize in reconnaissance learn this early on. Only those who are patient and collected can truly do stakeouts. Especially of this nature, where you are going to be infiltrating and destroying an enemy base, should the one you sent to open the way come through. "Haicho, the gate is opening," one of his men informed Ao. "I can see that," Ao said. While he did not show it he was impressed with the short amount of time it took for this boy to accomplish his mission. "It looks like he came through after all. Alright men, we're moving out." Naruto took a long chug out of his sake bottle, letting the liquid burn down his throat. Setting the bottle down, he closed his eyes as he took in several deep breaths, trying to settle his after-mission nerves. This had been one of his first missions above C rank. He didn't really count the wave mission, since it had originally been C rank, and Kakashi and Sasuke had done most of the fighting. The only other mission that had been above C was his mission to Yuki, and he had not killed anyone then. Despite that the mission had gone off without a hitch, he had given a nearly impeccable performance after the mission. Ao's team, which was the one he would be assigned to unless needed elsewhere, had even given a toast to him when they got back. Yet even with all the praise he was getting, his thoughts kept going back to the woman he had killed at the start of the mission. Try as he might he could not keep his mind off of the final look of pain and fear that had seen in her eyes as she died, which of course was why he was here. He had been unable to sleep and so had come to the small bar the base had to hopefully drink himself stupid. Unfortunately he was having no such luck as Kyuubi just burned the alcohol out of his system. As he was cursing the fox for all he was worth a voice spoke up behind him, "Yen, for your thoughts." Naruto turned around and came face to face with Mei. He gave her a somewhat pained smile and gestured for her to take a seat. Moving up to the stool she sat down next to him and shared a companionable silence. Naruto collected his thoughts before he began to speak. "I killed today." He looked over at Mei to find her looking at him with a raised eyebrow, finding it odd that a shinobi would be bothered by this. Still he was young, so maybe it was his first. "Normally this wouldn't be a problem. I've killed before, usually in self-defense or the few times me and Naughty Sensei ran into bandit camps." "Well, there went that idea. Wait, Hiro Sensei?" Mei asked with an amused smile. Naruto rubbed the back of his head as a sheepish expression passed over his face. "Sorry, I meant my sensei, Jiraiya." Mei's eyes actually widened in shock. "You mean the Jiraiya of the legendary 3? At Naruto's nod Mei turned to her own thoughts. When she had first heard that Konoha was only going to be sending one person to help them, Mei had been while not displeased as she had not expected much, had at the very least found herself feeling disappointed. However, the handsome young man before her seemed to have quite a bit of skill as he demonstrated with pulling off a successful infiltration mission, allowing them to destroy one of their enemy's strongholds for the first time. They had even managed to capture the commander of the base. He had provided her with the location of even more bases which she was planning on having the young blonde infiltrate. She could now see why he was so skilled. If he was trained by Jiraiya, she looked over at the blonde to see him looking at her quizzically and became somewhat embarrassed at spacing out. "I'm sorry, please continue." Naruto smiled appreciatively. He did not know why, but he felt comfortable in her presence, as if he could trust her. Naruto went back to his story. "It had been at the start of the mission, and I had just been about to sneak out of the medical room when the door opened. I can't really remember much except for instincts kicking in. One moment I'm just getting off the bed and the next there's a young woman in my arms clawing at her throat." "You looked in her eyes, didn't you?" Mei asked as an understanding light came to her. In the academy they had been taught that the worst possible thing you could do was stare into the eyes of someone you had killed. It had caused many problems for young genin who became plagued with nightmares about their first kills, many of which had to quit being a shinobi because they had become mentally unstable. It had been why the original graduation exam in Kiri had been to kill the person closest to you. They felt that if you could do that then killing some random person would be nothing. Naruto nodded. Yes, I had looked into her eyes and watched her die, saw the helpless and pained expression on her face. Naruto quickly wiped away a stray tear, hoping Mei wouldn't notice, she had, but decided to just file it away for later. But that's not even the worst of it, I killed a doctor, someone whose purpose in life was to heal others. While they do have some minor combat training, they never take a life unless they have to. People like us, he gestured to himself and Mei, we're killers. Our whole purpose revolves around causing more death than our enemy. Naruto paused. I've never really liked killing, in truth when I first thought about what I wanted to be my first choice was a doctor. Why didn't you become one? Mei asked in curiosity, a doctor was on the complete opposite end of the career spectrum. Honestly, Naruto sighed, I have no idea why or even when I had changed my mind. Wouldn't have mattered anyway, from the moment I was born I was chosen to be a ninja by factors outside of my life. Both of my parents were ninja, extremely powerful in their own right, that was part of the truth. But the biggest reason was because of Kyuubi, even if he had been given a choice, there was no other profession he could have chosen, because of that rather small detail. So you became a ninja because of your parents? Mei asked. Partially Naruto looked at her, I actually didn't even know who my parents were until a few months ago. But the Sandaime knew them, he would always tell me great stories about how my parents were such noble people who fought to protect their home. Of course I had no clue he was talking about them at the time. Sounds like he manipulated you, Mei scowled, she had never liked people who would manipulate an innocent child. It sounded like something Yagura would do so he could get a powerful pawn under his sway. Yes, I'm pretty sure that whether he knew it or not, he was indeed manipulating me to become a shinobi. Though I would never blame him for that, he was the Hokage after all, so I assume he was mainly telling me of his own feelings. Naruto took another swig of sake, I'm not well liked in my village, so this was really the only option I had available anyway. Naruto blinked in surprise, why did he just tell her that? This was only the second time he had even talked with her, it's not like they were close or anything. He couldn't blame it on the sake since he was unable to get inebriated, perhaps it was the aura she gave off. Maybe her comforting presence. Or perhaps it was some other factor he had yet to deduce. He looked over at Mei who seemed to be interested in that comment, deciding there was no harm in letting her know a little more he started again. Because of events that happened at my birth, events that I had no control over I have been hated all my life. Mei frowned at that, were your parents traitors? That was the only thing she could think of that would make the people of his village hate him. Though she did not think that was the case, especially if the Sandaime had hailed them as much as Naruto said he had. Of course he could have told Naruto that so he could manipulate him into becoming a shinobi. Naruto shook his head, no in fact my parents or at least one of my parents is considered the greatest hero the Hidden Leaf village has ever seen. Mei looked at the young man and thought there were very few heroes within Konoha during the time Naruto could have been born, at least ones who were not too old or too young to be his parents. She looked at him closely, studying his profile as if she was trying to put together the pieces to a puzzle. Now that she thought about it, he did remind her of someone she had seen in a textbook on the Third Great Ninja War. The man who had been hailed as the one to end that war with a single jutsu that had become so feared she doubted even Yagura would have fought him. An image came to her mind and a name clicked, she felt her eyes widened as she finally realized who his parents were. Or rather who his father was. I see you figured it out, Naruto said as he saw the recognition in her eyes, I would appreciate it if you didn't tell anyone of my parentage at least not yet. I can do that, Mei said after a bit of thought, he was trusting her with what had to be a fairly large secret. She knew it would cause a lot of problems not just for him, but for her as well, if word about Naruto's heritage got out. No doubt Iwa would be more than willing to join in the bloodline wars if they thought they could kill the son of the Kiroi Senku. Thanks, Naruto said with a small smile. Mei returned it as she looked at him, so why don't you continue your story? There's really nothing more to tell, Naruto said with a sigh, I killed someone who I feel didn't deserve to die. Sure she may have been the enemy, but people who can heal are some of the only people I really respect. It takes little effort to kill, however to heal takes a lot of work, time, effort and sweat. I think I understand, Mei said, and in truth she did. While Mei did not quite have Naruto's perspective she could understand his thoughts and feelings on this kind of subject. Still don't you feel better knowing that the people you care about are safe because you're fighting? Naruto chuckled, that's the only reason I'm still a shinobi, if I didn't have my precious people to protect there would be no way I would still be in this business. Mei smiled at the man who was quickly becoming something of an enigma to her. From just the little conversation she had had with him since he came here, she found herself intrigued. His apparent desire to protect the he cared for just made her want to figure him out all the more. So you fight to protect your precious people then? Naruto nodded absently as he took a drink of sake, only to be disappointed when he realized it was all gone. Then I suppose since you're here does that make me precious to you? Naruto looked over at Mei in surprise before he saw her slightly pouty expression. Naruto grinned as he tapped a finger to his chin. Well, he looked at her with a critical eye before leaning over and wrapping an arm around her waist. I suppose so, that is if you make me one of your precious people, he finished in a husky whisper. Mei shivered from his tone as a small blush spread across her delicate features, but she managed to keep her grin in place as she looked at him for a second before standing up. I guess I could make you one of my precious people, Mei said using Naruto's term as she winked at him. Provided you escort me to my room. Naruto laughed as he stood up and stuck his arm out for Mei to take. I can do that, though some of your men might get jealous to see you cuddling up to the new guy. Well then I suppose they will stay jealous, won't they? Mei asked rhetorically as they left the bar. I hope you're not intimidated by any of my admirers. Me intimidated, Naruto scoffed, don't make me laugh, I was just worried that they may end up in the hospital for trying to put me in my place. Mei giggled before they continued to walk down the hall, a companionable silence coming between the two. True to Naruto's prediction, he did draw several angry glares from almost all of the men who were also in the hall, no doubt wondering how the new guy was so close to their leader when he had only been here for a few days. What Naruto had not expected was some of the women who actually glared at Mei. Naruto had not been here long enough to be really known, and he had not met any of these women even in passing. He wondered if they simply thought she was degrading herself by getting so close to someone after only a few days of their first meeting. It's because they're jealous. Huh? Naruto asked in a somewhat dumb tone as he turned to look at Mei. Mei covered her mouth with her free hand as she giggled. Word of how you rescued a woman from being raped apparently spread through the base soon after you arrived. It seems that your good deed made you quite popular. But they don't even know me. Naruto said, blinking before realizing what was going on. I can't believe I didn't think I would see fangirls in the middle of a war. This comment caused Mei to laugh outright, causing the people around the two to become startled. Mei's laugh calmed down and became an occasional small giggle. Well, to be honest, I didn't expect it either, but there you have it, she said as she made a casual gesture to a few of the girls around her. I suppose so, Naruto said as they once again continued in silence. A few moments later they were at Mei's door. Mei turned around and gave him an alluring smile. Thank you for escorting me, kind sir. Naruto grinned at her as he gave an exaggerated bow. Not at all, my lady, it has been a pleasure to merely find myself so graced as to be in the presence of a goddess such as you. Charmer, Mei murmured, unable to contain a blush from the comment. I am so such thing, Naruto affected mock surprised look. I am merely someone who speaks what I think. Naruto took her hand and gave it a small kiss. Looking up, he was pleased to see Mei's face was now red. He gave her one last smile. I'll see you later, Mei-chan. Mei's blush increased in hue at the addition of the affectionate suffix Naruto added to her name. Mei-chan, I could get used to being called that. She looked at where Naruto was going down the corridor. Naruto Namikaze, you truly are an enigma I will enjoy figuring out. Naruto looked around at the other people who had also been called to Mei's office. Two of them he didn't know. They were not frontline soldiers, so he had never fought by their side. All he knew was that one of them was the head of the medical staff and the other managed the supplies they acquired through various means. He also knew that the one who managed the supplies did not like him for some reason. The man was fairly young, so Naruto assumed it was because of how close he was to Mei. The man had complained once about Mei insisting on having Naruto with them as a part of their meetings. He never did it again after Mei threatened to melt his balls, of which Naruto had later found out she could quite literally do. Ao was also with them. He and the hunter Nin had gotten closer in the past 5 months Naruto had been here. During that time Naruto had usually been with Ao's team and had gone on several more infiltrate and destroy missions. There was also Chijuro, a shy young man with blue hair, black eyes and sharp shark-like teeth, a trait he shared with Zabuza and Kisame. He wore black-rimmed glasses that were connected to a set of headphones. He was wearing a blue striped shirt with camouflage pants, while his Hidia-8 was worn across his chest. He carried a large sword on his back called Hiramekure, which was wrapped in bandages much like Kisame did with his sword. Naruto had met and teamed up with him during one of his missions. They got along well enough. Naruto had found out that despite being a member of the Kiri, no Shinobigatanan and SHK Chijuro was extremely shy and underconfident. Though he had noticed the man seemed to find the courage to glare at him whenever Mei was on Naruto's arm and flirting with him. Naruto looked back at Mei, who had an apprehensive look on her face. Naruto was not sure why this meeting had been called, since they met every week on Wednesdays to hear reports and plan. All Naruto knew was that it was apparently important, most likely new intel that could spell trouble for the rebels. As you all know, we have recently dealt several harsh blows to the Mizukage's forces. Mei started catching the attention of the people in the room. That was true enough. In the past 5 months they had managed to destroy 10 enemy strongholds, cutting off valuable trade routes and isolating enemy forces, allowing the bloodline side to pick them off. After that first mission Naruto had been on, they had continued to use the infiltration tactic with great success. While Naruto would not claim credit for being the reason their missions were so successful, he was glad to know that he was helping bring this violent war to a close. However, it seems that with our success Yugura has decided that we have become a serious threat. I have received intel that he has amassed his forces, and they will be heading towards our base at 1 month's time to destroy us. The two who had no part in the fighting paled at her words and began to mumble to themselves. A glare from Mei quickly shut them up. Because of this I am planning an evacuation of the base. We are lucky that we were able to get this information fast enough so that we can evacuate the base without costing lives. So we're going to have to run, eh? Asked Ao with a small grumble. Back in my day when we had to face such engagements we. Mei interrupted with a sickly sweet voice as one of her perfectly shaped eyebrows twitched. Shut up or I'll kill you. Ao paled. I didn't mean to imply that. Naruto gave a silent laugh as he listened to the small banter. Naruto had realized a while ago that this was a common occurrence between the two. Mei tended to get a particularly bad attitude when Ao would start talking, mainly because he would somehow end up making a comment that could easily be taken as a talk about marriage. Mei had confided in Naruto privately that she was somewhat depressed that she was going to reach her 30s in a few years and had yet to find a husband. Naruto had merely laughed and told her that a woman as beautiful as her shouldn't worry about such things since she would no doubt have men flocking to her as soon as the war was over. This had led to a little wordplay between the two that had begun to happen more often these days, especially when it was just the two of them. Naruto had grown much closer to the busty redhead. He would not deny that he was quite possibly starting to fall for her. She was smart, strong, intelligent, beautiful, and seemed to have the same love of flirty wordplay that he had. While Naruto would deny it vehemently to anyone who commented on it, traveling with Jiraiya had slightly tainted him. While Naruto would never peep on a woman like Inadi-sensei did, he always took great joy in making a woman blush, either with a subtle or not so subtle compliment on her looks, or making a comment laced with innuendo. Seeing a beautiful woman who seemed to enjoy the same thing he did was not only welcome, since it kept things fun, but also because their talks kept Naruto from having nightmares about the things he had done and seen in this war. Mei-chan, Naruto said, getting her attention as well as several glares from the others at calling Mei by such a in their eyes, disrespectful suffix. Yes, Naruto-kun. Mei asked, not caring to look at the shocked and jealous looks the two received. Honestly, she had figured these people would have been used to it by now. I don't think there is any need to evacuate, in fact this could be where we end the war. Naruto's statement caused several shocked looks all around. It was extremely bold to claim that they could end the war right now. Despite numerous recent victories and cutting down about 1/3 of Yugura's forces, they were still outnumbered 3-1. That's a bold claim to make, Naruto, Mei said, dropping the suffix as she adopted a completely serious tone. I assume you have a plan. Naruto simply reached into his cloak's inner pocket and set down a large tri-pronged kunai on the table. While the people around him were wondering what the odd kunai was, Mei's eyes widened. You mean? Yes, Naruto said in a firm voice. It's time the world was reintroduced to the Flash. Naruto stared out across the plain trying to see if the enemy had arrived. Like always in Mizu no Kuni, the area was extremely misty, giving everyone very low visibility. Looking to his right and left, Naruto saw several people who were lining up kunai launchers. If he were to look behind him, he knew that he would see people doing the same thing. He noticed that most of the people who were preparing them were looking at the odd tri-pronged kunai in curiosity, most likely wondering what it was and how it could be used to end the war. Naruto and Mei had refused to say anything, and the only person who the blonde was sure knew what was going to happen was Ao, who was more knowledgeable than most people from Mizu due to his travels. Because of how isolated Mizu no Kuni was, most people who lived there did not have much information about the world outside their country. All these people knew was that their job was to launch the kunai. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Naruto smiled as he closed his eyes. He had known she was there for a while now, having gotten used to her presence. He let himself find comfort in her presence a little longer before answering, yes, this war has gone on long enough. Naruto turned around to face the busty redhead and gave her a smile. It would be selfish of me to not use one of my abilities just so my secret can remain secret. Mei gave Naruto a smile. Despite the war he had been through, Naruto still maintained a strong sense of right and wrong. She did not know when it happened, but sometime along the line, Naruto had made it his personal goal to end the bloodshed in Kiri. Perhaps it had always been there, and that was why she had not seen it. Maybe when he first came here and saw how bad life was here that he decided to help. She couldn't be sure, and if she were honest with herself she didn't care, just knowing that this young man who had quite literally turned the tide in the war was with her was enough. "Thank you," she said in a voice so low that even Naruto's enhanced hearing almost caused him to miss it. Naruto tilted her head up to his. In the last few months Naruto had hit a growth spurt and was now at a height of 5'9", about a head taller than Mei. "You don't need to thank me, even if Konoha told me to return right now I would stay and help you finish this." Mei's small smile turned into a sultry grin as she closed the distance between them. Such heroic nature deserves a suitable reward, don't you think? She began to draw circles on his clothing, which was missing the typical hooded cloak he usually wore while on missions, allowing Mei to feel the rock-hard muscles the young man was packing. Naruto smirked, opting to be more bold than usual as he put an arm around her waist and pulled her into a one-armed embrace, making the two of them melt together. "If you insist," Naruto said, turning his voice into a husky growl. "I remember reading that Mizu had some nice hot springs, perhaps the two of us can see if that's still true." "Why aren't you bold, Naruto-kun?" Mei said, holding a hand to her face to hide the blush that had spread to her cheeks. "I can't believe this, we're going into battle, and you are making naughty things. We'll banter with each other." Both Naruto and Mei turned to Ao with deadpan expression. "Why, back in my day when we were going to fight we would." "Ao," the two said in eerie unison. There was an odd shadow covering their faces, making it so that Ao could not see their eyes. "Shut up or we'll kill you." Ao instantly paled, and despite considering himself brave took a step back. Having Terumi-sama threaten him was bad enough, but adding Naruto as well, the old hunter ninja felt a shiver of fear run down his spine. "Well, I just wanted to tell you that the ADA for the enemy is 30 minutes, and I'll just leave you two now." "Thank you, you may go back to your post," Mei said, adopting her leader voice. Ao quickly bowed and walked away, hoping he could make it as far away from those two as possible and hopefully not see them until the end of this battle. Mei turned back to Naruto. "Are you ready?" Naruto nodded, yes. Mei nodded before looking at the ground for a second, nodding her head as if she were coming to an important decision. Mei looked back at Naruto. Leaning on her toes, she gave him a small kiss on the cheek, leaving a light blue imprint of her lipstick on him. Naruto's eyes widened for a second as he brought up a hand to his cheek. This time he was the one who found himself becoming red, which only made the blue lip imprint Mei left stand out more. "That was for luck," Mei told him with a heartfelt smile, "and to make sure you come back." Naruto's face slowly turned back to its natural tanned color as he grinned. "Do I get another if I make it back alive?" Mei struck up a thinking pose. "If you make it back alive, I'll give you something even better, perhaps that trip to the hot spring you wanted." Deciding to leave their conversation on a light note, Mei gave him a wink and walked off. Naruto turned back to look at the preparations with a large grin on his face. Despite knowing he was going to be forced to kill today, that kiss had made his day. He channeled some chakra to his eyes to give himself some slightly enhanced vision, in the hopes of clearing the thick mist. He sighed when he couldn't pierce through the mist, meaning it would be a waiting game until they came within range of his vision. He took slow breaths as he remained calm, in all honesty had no clue if he could pull this off. This would be the first time he used the Hiraishin in battle, but he had spent several days getting used to the feel of using the space-time jutsu. So with some luck or perhaps Kami on their side, he would hopefully be able to pull it off and defeat the enemies that were now coming for the Bloodline rebels. It was about 10 minutes later that he saw the first troops trying to race across the field as quickly as possible. For a shinobi, open war combat was the most dangerous kind. Unlike samurai who rely on their swords and charging the enemies head first into battle, ninja used large-scale ninjutsu and other powerful techniques and weapons like explosive notes that were designed to take out a large amount of enemies at once. This meant that combat in any kind of open space was extremely dangerous. On the few occasions that moving in an open field couldn't be helped, it was always the best option to try to cross it as fast as possible. It would do little good here. "Enemy forces are approaching, ready the kunai." Naruto yelled out his order. The people around Naruto instantly obeyed without question or hesitation. While he was not their leader and technically not even a member of their forces, they felt inclined to listen to him. During the 6 months of constant war, Naruto had gained a charismatic presence that added to his ability to make people listen to and believe in him. Once the kunai were ready, Naruto gave the signal. Fire. To many of the shinobi, it had happened too fast for them to follow. 1 minute they were running across the flat clearing to move closer to the enemy base so they could start launching their attack before the Bloodline rebels had a chance to respond. The next minute they were forced to dodge and block a literal hail of kunai that began raining down on them. While this was not hard since the kunai were only in the hundreds and were spaced apart by about 15 meters, it had forced them to halt in their advance. When the kunai stopped coming, many of the ninja paused to pick one up to see what it was. None of them had ever seen a kunai of this kind before. That was when it happened. A bright yellow flash began appearing in several places so quick that it seemed as if the flashes were happening at the same time. Each time the flash disappeared, anywhere from 10 to 20 ninja would drop before it disappeared again and began attacking another area. The enemy had no idea what was happening, nor any time to comprehend their untimely defeat, as their forces were picked apart piecemeal. Naruto flashed in front of a man who had grabbed one of the kunai, launching a Rasengan into the man's stomach. Naruto grabbed a kunai and put it in his pouch before he flashed again. Flashing behind a woman, he gave her a chop to the back of the neck before moving on to another man and smashing a fist in his face hard enough to send the man flying. Said man was unconscious before he hit the ground. Each time Naruto flashed, he made sure to grab the kunai while simultaneously knocking out or killing the enemy. No sense in letting others grab them, since they would not be able to use it anyway. Naruto found the experience of flashing from place to place using the Hiraishin to be somewhat disorienting. No one but Minato and now Naruto truly knew how the jutsu worked or what it did. When in what Naruto was beginning to call the flash, it slowed down one's perception of time, allowing them to make decisions in mere milliseconds, making it an extremely powerful technique. Not only that, but he was able to keep track of everything that was happening within a 15-meter radius from the kunai due to the sensor arrays in the shiki, allowing him to flash anywhere within that range and take out his opponents. However, it also had its drawbacks. The jutsu took a toll on the body, as it was not meant to do this, as well as the information from the kunai that could overload his mind if he was not careful. The strain, especially for first-time users, were incredible. Naughty Sensei had told Naruto that the first time his father had used a Hiraishin, the man had passed out mere minutes afterwards. Up in the area where Mei and the other shinobi who were waiting could not help but watch in a mixture of fear and awe as one man destroyed an entire army. To them it seemed as if the entire field was covered in giant yellow flashes of light as Naruto teleported from point to point, taking people out left and right. In truth, the entire thing lasted only a few minutes at the most. Nearly the entire Mizukage force was either dead or merely unconscious. However, there was still one man who was not out of the fight yet. It was the man Naruto had been hoping to get first, if he were honest. He had of course tried, but the man had formed his Bijuu shroud, making kunai, swords and even the standard Rasengan useless. As the rest of the enemies were felled, the flash disappeared and in its place was a somewhat heavily breathing Naruto, who was currently standing across the chakra-covered Yagura. Who would have thought that I would have been able to witness that jutsu firsthand, Yagura mused absently as he looked at Naruto, who merely glared at the man. I presume you are the thorn in my side that appeared a few months back, yes? Again Naruto said nothing, causing Yagura to sigh. A pity that you won't talk. I don't talk to people who take joy in killing others, Naruto stated with a fierce glare. Take joy? Yagura said, actually sounding surprised. I take no joy in causing death, boy. But to preserve the pure blood of humans I must extinguish those whose blood has become tainted. Naruto scowled as he got into his fight stance, considering that bloodlines were said to come from the Bijuu. I find it funny that you of all people are talking about purity. Enough talk, Yagura glared as the comment Naruto made apparently got to him. I am going to enjoy shutting that mouth of yours up permanently. You're welcome to try. The two disappeared in a blur and a resounding crash rang throughout the clearing. Mei felt her eyes widen as she watched the new battle that was starting to take place. Just as it seemed like Naruto had literally won the war for them, a new threat popped up, and in the worst possible form. The intelligence had received had not mentioned anything about Yagura actually coming to the battlefield himself, though in hindsight she supposed it made sense if most of his forces were going into battle. Now Naruto was fighting a cage-level ninja who was also a jinchuuriki, said to have full control over his Bijuu. Things were not looking good right now. Ow. Mei called out, getting the man to her side immediately. I want you to gather your forces and have them see who among the battlefield are alive. Knowing Naruto, most of them are probably just unconscious. Take them prisoner so we can sort out who the criminals are later. Ao bowed, of course Terumi-sama, if I may ask, where will you be? I'm going to help Naruto, Mei replied as she began running towards the battle that was now taking place. Naruto grunted as he took a hit that felt like it shattered his entire ribcage. He had, in all honesty, never felt someone hit that hard. Of course he had only ever fought one other jinchuuriki before, but all Gaara had been able to do was turn into a giant tanuki. Naruto flipped on his feet and began going through several hand signs. Raiden. John. Lightning release. False darkness. A large blast of lightning shot out of Naruto's mouth and tore through the landscape as it headed for Yagura. The attack hit dead on, and Naruto waited for the dust to clear before making his next move. When it did, Naruto cursed at not even seeing a scratch on the man. Apparently when one had full control over their Bijuu as displayed here, it came with some serious advantages. Yagura came at Naruto again, getting in front of him faster than most people could blink and aiming a punch with enough power that it would take off the blonde's head. Fortunately Naruto had trained extensively to fight at high speeds and dodged the blow, tilting his head to the side as he crouched down. A Rasengan appeared in both his hands before he shoved them into the Mizukage's stomach and chest. It seemed to have an effect as Naruto was able to put more chakra into it than when he used the Hiraishin. A scream tore itself through the cloaked Sanbi Jinchuuriki's throat as his stomach and chest muscles were partly torn away before he was sent flying. The man managed to flip onto his feet and looked up at Naruto with a snarl. Naruto grimaced at seeing the man's muscles and flesh almost finished healing. He wondered if this was what it felt like for others when he just healed any injury he received. Oh, I can just tell, this is going to be fun. The three tails that waved themselves behind Yagura suddenly came up to the front as the man opened his mouth, large amounts of concentrated chakra forming between the tails. Naruto was curious for a moment, wondering what Yagura was doing. That amount of demonic chakra would kill anyone, even him. The Mizukage swallowed the condensed matter of chakra, becoming extremely heavy and causing the earth he was standing on to shatter. Sanbi Koimari. Three tails menacing ball. Fuck. Naruto swore as a large blast of pure energy was launched at him. Naruto threw one of the Hiraishin kunai he had been sure to gather as he fought. Just as the attack was about to hit, Naruto flashed out of the way, catching the kunai before he landed on the ground. Naruto looked to where he had been, the attack had been, and saw that it had torn a 50-foot diameter trench through the spot, and it looked like it continued on for miles. Naruto was glad that he had been on the opposite side of the rebels, or they would have been annihilated. I'm beginning to hate that jutsu. Naruto turned to see Yagura glaring at him. Not deigning to speak, Naruto got into his fighting stance again. Yagura chuckled before coming at him full force, channeling Kyuubi's chakra into his fist. Naruto began to meet the man blow for blow as the fight continued. Unfortunately, Yagura could use more tails than Naruto, who could only use one, and the punches were beginning to hurt. However, there was really not that much that Naruto could do. Jutsu were for the most part useless. The only thing that worked was the Rasengan, and Naruto, while not having used a lot of chakra, would not be able to make many more. The strain of using the Hiraishin so much today without being well trained in it had taken a large toll on his body. Naruto ducked under a swipe sent his way before being forced to twist himself out of the path of one of the man's tails. As Yagura sent another punch at the blonde, Naruto sidestepped the attack while grabbing the arm and pulling him into a knee. It didn't seem to do anything as the man just got back up and began attacking him even more furiously. Naruto dodged another punch, only to have his feet swept out from under him. The blonde managed to roll to the left just in time to dodge another blow from Yagura that shattered the earth. Pushing himself onto his feet, Naruto shot off towards his opponent, appearing in front of Yagura before sending another, larger Rasengan at the man. Idoma Rasengan. Big Bull Rasengan. There was a large explosion and Yagura was sent flying back, rolling to the ground a few times before coming to a stop. Naruto was hunched over, panting as the man got up again. He noticed that the wounds, while still healing, were more extensive. Naruto cursed. He needed to use a stronger jutsu. If only he had some way to distract his jinchuuriki opponent, he may be able to use that jutsu. Yoten. Lava bullet. Several bullets of molten magma shot at Yagura, impacting and making him stumble forward as he screamed out in pain from the lava melting the skin off his back. Naruto looked over to see Mei Terumi running towards him with a worried yet determined expression. Unfortunately, the blonde also noticed Yagura's eyes catch onto Mei's form. Both Naruto and Yagura disappeared. Mei suddenly found herself being thrown to the side as Naruto pushed her away from Yagura. Ducking under a punch, Naruto shoved another Rasengan at his opponent, wincing as his arms felt the strain of the attack as it drilled into his opponent's ribs. As Yagura was thrown away, Naruto ran towards Mei. "Are you alright?" he asked as he offered her a hand. "I think I should be the one asking that," Mei said as she accepted the help up. "I hope you have a plan for beating him because I'm drawing a blank." "Maybe," Naruto breathed. "How long can you hold him off for?" 10 minutes at the most," Mei said, looking to where Yagura was getting back up. "That should be more than enough time," Naruto said. "Be careful when you fight him." "I will," Mei said as she charged towards Yagura and began doing hand seals. Button. Skilled Mist. Boil release Skilled Mist. As Mei began to launch Yoten and Futon jutsu at Yagura, making sure to keep her distance, Naruto created a clone. Holding out his hand, Naruto formed a Rasengan. The clone began to channel wind chakra into the spinning maelstrom of destruction. "I'm only going to have one shot at this, I need to make it count." The Rasengan began to turn pure white as 4 points appeared swirling around its outer edge, making the jutsu look like a 4-point shuriken. A loud screeching sound began to fill the air as the jutsu became complete. He looked over at Mei, who had several bruises, but for the most part looked okay. "Mei. Get out of the way." Mei jumped away from Yagura as Naruto channeled a concentrated dose of chakra to his feet, shooting off with such force that the landscape literally buckled and cracked when Naruto kicked off. Speeding towards Yagura, Naruto thrust out his hand. Futon. Rasen Shuriken. Wind Release. Spiral Ball Shuriken. Yagura had no time to react as the jutsu hit him head-on, tearing through the Bijuu cloak like it was mere paper as he was lifted into the air. The large dome 80 feet in diameter appeared around him as millions upon millions of wind blades sliced into the jinchuuriki at the cellular level. Had the dome not blocked out sound, Naruto and Mei were sure they would have heard screaming, seeing as Yagura's mouth was open in a silent yell. Finally the dome vanished and Yagura's body fell to the ground. A second later there was a large burst of light as the chakra from the Biju escaped. At first Naruto was worried, he did not have the energy to fight anymore and he doubted that Mei could stand up to a Biju. Luck seemed to be with them as the Biju did not have the energy to reform and dispersed, most likely heading to another location where it could regain its strength. Naruto closed his eyes as he fell to the ground, breathing heavily as sweat began to pour down his features. Now that the adrenaline was wearing off he could really feel the strain that using the Hiraishin had taken on his body, as well as an intense pain in his arm. He looked at his arm and grimaced, it had thousands of tiny cuts on it, much like what Yagura had albeit on a smaller scale. They were already beginning to heal as Kyuubi chakra went to work, still the jutsu hurt like a bitch to use, and he had hoped that he would not need it again until he found a way to throw it. He opened his eyes when he felt his head being lifted up and put on something soft. What he saw was Mei smiling at him as she began to stroke his hair. "Are you alright?" Naruto asked. "Shouldn't I be asking that?" she questioned as she looked him up and down. His clothes were completely ripped, leaving him with his pants which were now shorts and his combat boots. "You look like shit." Naruto chuckled, "Oh good, then it's not just my imagination because I feel like shit. Is everyone safe?" "Yes," she said, many of the people were actually walking over to them after having witnessed the battle. "Looks like you're a hero, huh?" Naruto tried to laugh only to wince as he felt his chest strain under the pressure. "I suppose, well, I think I'm gonna have to take a rain check on that reward, good night." With that the blonde shinobi closed his eyes as the last bit of adrenaline left his body and he fell asleep. Mei looked at him for a good while as she continued to absently run a hand through his hair. She looked over at the battle site and shook her head. The battlefield was a site of absolute destruction, the techniques used having literally reformed the landscape. She looked over at the large crater Naruto's jutsu created. She had never seen such a destructive technique, even her Yoten attacks didn't do that much damage. Looking back at Naruto she smiled, enigma indeed. It had been 6 months after the battle and things had been running smoothly in Mist. Mei had been selected as the new Mizukage and immediately began putting plans up to rebuild Kiri and the neighboring cities. With the help of many of the ninja, both those who had been on the bloodline side and the ones who had been against Yagura but could not leave for fear of their families, had begun to help with the repairs. With the two factions now working under one banner and with the support of the Mizu daimyo, Kiri was beginning to get underway to returning to its former glory. Of course it also helped that a certain blonde shinobi had decided to stay and help Kiri get back on its feet, creating a literal army of Kage Bushin, which he used to help Mei and the others in their repairs. Word had begun to reach many of the outlying cities in Mizu no Kuni about Naruto's amazing feat in defeating an entire army with a single jutsu and battling the former Mizukage right afterwards. Many people had begun to hail his name here as the hero of Kiri. Naruto, while appreciative of the people's good thoughts of him, could not help but a bit feel apprehensive. News of what he did here would not doubt reach the other nations, despite the isolation this one had from the rest of the elemental countries. When it did he had no doubt that he would face several issues, namely Iwa and Akatsuki. He decided not to worry about that now as he sat in the new Mizukage office as Mei read over the last few reports for the day. Now that they were experiencing a new time of peace, Naruto had made sure to get to know the Busty Cage under circumstances where they did not have to fear for their life. He had to say that it was fun taking Mei out to eat, out for a walk, or when they watched a movie after the new cinema had been built. That had been an experience since they had watched the Princess Gale movie with Yuki Fujikaze aka Koyuki Kazuhana, which many of the people including Mei had been shocked to see showing their hero when he was younger. All in all it was a good experience and allowed Mei to get out of the office every now and then, a place that seemed to be taking up more of her time than she would have liked. Unfortunately he now had to leave. A few days ago he received a message that Jiraiya was on his way here and it would in fact not surprise the young blonde if the man already was here. He looked over as he felt some added weight on the couch and saw Mei looking at him with a curious expression. He gave her a smile. "It looks like this is goodbye for now." "You're leaving?" she asked with a frown. She had grown close to the young man and did not want him to go. During the war it had been her talks with him that brought her comfort and allowed her to forget all of the bloodshed, even if only for a little while. "Jiraiya is probably already in town." Naruto ran a hand through his hair. "Now that my mission is complete, I'm no doubt going to begin my training again." "I don't really think you need any more training," Mei mused with a grin. "I wish that were true," Naruto said with a sad smile, "but once word gets out my enemies which are already quite numerous will multiply. I have to be ready so I can protect not only myself but the people they will no doubt use to get to me." Mei sighed. Someone as young as him should not have so many enemies. She shook off the morbid thoughts. "So when will I see you again?" she asked. Naruto smirked at her, causing the woman to become curious. Reaching into his cloak, the blonde pulled out a tri-pronged kunai that he handed to her. "We can see each other whenever," Naruto started, his smirk turning into a grin. "Just make sure that you limit it to once every 2 weeks if it's not an emergency. That way I'll make sure to come whenever you call." Mei smiled as she closed her hand on the kunai. "Thank you." Ma, you don't have to thank me," he began with a grin before affecting a mock sad expression. "I would miss you far too much if we didn't get to see each other," he sniffed as he wiped away a false tear. Mei's smile turned into a sultry grin. "Oh, perhaps I can interest you in staying so we would never be apart. You know we never tried out those hot springs together." Naruto chuckled. "A part of me is definitely tempted to stay, but we both know I can't. Still, I have 2 more things I want to give you." "Oh, and what's them, ph?" Mei was silenced as Naruto brought them into a passionate lip lock. Mei slowly closed her eyes as she wrapped her arms around Naruto's neck. Naruto in turn brought his around her waist, pulling her up so she was sitting on his lap. When Mei opened her mouth to moan, Naruto instinctively brought his tongue into her mouth, increasing the volume and frequency of Mei's moaning. One of Mei's hands went into Naruto's hair as Naruto's hands began to rub up and down Mei's thighs. When they finally parted, both were breathing heavily with flushed faces. Wow, was all Mei could think to say after the kiss. "Wow indeed," Naruto said with a laugh before kissing her again. "Ready, brat?" Naruto looked up to see Jiraiya standing at the entrance to Kiri. His arms were crossed and he had a smirk on his face. "You bit naughty sensei," Naruto said as he walked past the man. Jiraiya soon caught up to Naruto and looked at him. "You know you're the talk of the entire country." "Yeah, I know," Naruto said, having a feeling he knew where this was going. "Talks about you defeating an entire army with a single jutsu," Jiraiya continued. "It's naughty sensei, I used the Hiraishin to defeat the Mizukage's forces." Naruto looked at his sensei irritably. "You know this may come back to bite you in the ass, right?" Naruto sighed. "I know, but I couldn't just sit by and do nothing. Those people needed my help." Jiraiya was torn between being worried and being impressed. After all, his apprentice had just won a war and became a hero. "You're just like your father, you know that, Gaki?" he asked with a smile as he decided to go with pride. "Always thinking about others before yourself, with that selfless attitude of yours." "I'll take that as a compliment," Naruto said with a smirk. They continued walking in comfortable silence for a while before Jiraiya spoke again. "By the way, nice job on bagging the hot Mizukage, I am impressed." Naruto stopped dead in his tracks for a second, forcing Jiraiya to stop and turn to him. "That was supposed to be a private moment between me and Mei-chan, naughty sensei." Jiraiya shivered at the tone of voice, having heard it before on another blonde when he tried to sneak a peek on Kushina. The beating he had received from that was almost worse than the time he was nearly killed for peeking on Tsunade. He quickly began to stumble back from the angry blonde as he raised his hands in front of his face defensively. "Then now listen, Naruto, the Domari Sengen. Big Bullry Sengen. Boom." Meanwhile, in the Mizukage's office, Mei was sitting in her chair looking out at the village with a large smile on her face, thinking back to her small makeout session with Naruto. She hoped when he visited they could do it again. "Maybe when he comes back we can go to those hot springs and have other kinds of fun," she thought with a blush. As she shifted in her seat, she noticed something fall out of her dress. Picking it up, she recognized it as a letter. Opening it up, she put the letter on her desk. She began to read. "Dear Mei-chan. During our time together I feel we have grown closer than most people do and would like to start a relationship with you. Before we can, however, there are several things you need to know. At the bottom of this letter is a containment seal containing information I feel will be important to our future. Inside this seal is the information I want to give you. Look it up under Article D, Clause 36. Love. Naruto." Mei smiled at the warm feelings Naruto's letter evoked and could not help but feel curious about what he wanted her to know. Unsealing the content of the containment seal, she picked up a book and read the title, Konoha Clan Charter and Laws. Blinking in surprise at the title, she shrugged before looking for the section Naruto wanted her to read. Boom. Mei looked startled when a loud explosion rocked the building. She saw a large ball of energy that she recognized from Naruto's fight with Yagura. Figuring that Naruto-sensei had just done something perverted, she shrugged as if nothing had happened. She turned back to the law book she was reading. Chapter 3. Kitsune, Nico and Rapper. It was a quiet day in the village of Konoha as the sun began to set. Tsunade looked out over the buildings from her office in the Hokage Tower as she quietly sipped some sake. It was one of the rare moments where she had actually finished her paperwork rather than just shove it off to the side so she could drink herself into a stupor. As she looked out of the window, she couldn't help but wonder how Naruto was doing. Last she had heard from Jiraiya via toad summoning was about a month ago and simply stated he was doing well and still alive. It had been about a year since she had been convinced by Jiraiya that her son-brother-grandson figure needed to learn about the harsh realities of war and gain real-life experience. It made her reluctantly give Naruto a mission that she had originally been going to throw away. She hoped he was okay. If he had been hurt or killed in Kiri, she would never forgive herself for allowing Jiraiya to convince her to send the blonde there. Of course, if she found out that happened, she would give Jiraiya a reason to regret convincing her to send Naruto as well. The knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. The door opened to reveal Shizune walking in with a scroll. She walked over and put it on the desk for Tsunade. "It's a message from Kurigakure," Shizune said without preamble. The young woman did not know why they had sent a message out to Konoha, since they were embroiled in a civil war right now, but she assumed it was a call for help. Tsunade had not told anyone that she had actually sent help to them earlier when they had sent their first request. Everyone had assumed that she had simply tossed the mission because of their policy involving foreign affairs. Tsunade snatched the scroll from the desk as soon as those words left her assistant's mouth and unrolled it. "Thank you, Shizune," Tsunade said as she began to read. Shizune, well curious, decided not to ask as she bowed and left, closing the door behind her with a resounding click. Tsunade continued to read as the sun went down. By the time she was finished, she leaned back against her chair with a shocked expression. She had just received a message from the new Mizukage mate Terumi. Apparently the war was over, and mate claimed that it was over because of Naruto. Of course, given what she was reading. "That little brat," Tsunade said with a smile as she turned back to look out at the village. "It looks like I'm going to have to call a council meeting soon. Is this information accurate?" "Yes, Danzo-sama," said a kneeling figure. "Both reports from our spies in Kiri and word going through the ranks of its shinobi have confirmed this." Danzo Shimura frowned as he tried to think about what to do with this information. Danzo had always been a very shrewd and intelligent man, having once even been a candidate for Hokage because of his talents. Though he had been beaten by Hiruzen Sarutobi for the position, Danzo had always been a player in the background, helping manipulate things along so that the village of Konoha remained safe from its enemies. His root program was one such thing, having been originally created by the Nidaime Hokage to undertake missions from the shadows and train shinobi at a young age to be tools. Danzo was a man who would use any tactic no matter how underhanded if it meant he would be able to protect his home, taking missions that Tsunade and the other Hokages would have thrown away. Of course, he refused to remain in the shadows forever. He had already hatched a plan to become the next Hokage. There were just a few problems that he needed to take care of first. One of them was Tsunade, the woman, while powerful, did not understand that to keep Konoha strong, they needed to be more aggressive in their approach to foreign affairs. Another problem was the information he just received. Apparently Tsunade had done something he would not have expected or capable of and sent one of their shinobi to aid in the bloodline civil war in Kiri. That shinobi was none other than Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, the Kyuubi Jinchuuriki and son of the Yondaime. Danzo of course knew of the boy's heritage. It had been a simple matter to find the information by having one of his roots steal the blood test on the boy, which had merely helped confirm his suspicions. It made sense in a way. Minato had always been one of the more noble people he had known, even when at war. It would make sense that he would not use anyone other than his own son for the sealing. He was definitely a man that Danzo had respect for, even if he did not agree with his soft policies. The problem that Danzo now had was information that Naruto had been the one responsible for granting the Kiri bloodline clan's victory. While that in itself was not quite a problem, the fact that the boy had apparently been able to recreate the Hiraishin was. Danzo had spent a long time plotting and planning for the day when the roots of Konoha could rule. This boy could be a great hindrance to his plans with the power he was gaining. Of course, he could be a great asset as well, Danzo thought to himself as he tried to come up with a way to get the blonde under his thumb. If he could somehow get the boy under his control, it would make Danzo's plans that much easier to accomplish. He would bide his time. The boy was to come back in 2 years, and in that time Danzo would start to make his move. The one-eyed man looked over at his subordinate still in a kneeling position. "I want the boy's progress monitored, and I want to be sent weekly reports. Get it done." "Hi, Danzo-sama." "Halt." Naruto and Jiraiya stopped as one of the Volt shinobi stepped in front of them. Foreign ninja are not allowed in without a passport. Jiraiya stuck a hand in his vest and pulled out 2 small red books. "We've got our passports right here." As the man looked over the passports, Naruto studied the Volt officer's outfit. Volt was Kumo's version of the Anbu that Konoha was so famous for. They were typically assigned into 3 branches of the military: assassination, combat and warfare (CNW), and the last one, torture and interrogation (INT), much like the Anbu of Konoha. Their attire was also very similar to the Anbu, with the difference being in the colors of their vest, which was white rather than black. The Volt officer nodded. "Very well, these look to be in order. Try not to cause any trouble and enjoy your stay here in Kumo." Jiraiya nodded and the two of them passed through the gates and made their way into the village. Naruto used the time they were walking to look around and study Kumo's layout. Like all of the hidden villages, Kumo had not strayed far from the original design that all of the great shinobi nations possess, which were created during the founding of the hidden villages during the First Great War. However, unlike Konoha, Kumo had not demilitarized themselves like many of the others had after the Third War. This was evidenced as Naruto looked around at most of the people who were milling about. It was easy to tell that aside from the children, nearly 75% of Kumo's population were ninja from the way they walked, their walks being far more graceful than civilians. It was also the only place where Naruto had seen people with such dark skin. Kumo had a large history of attempting to seek an edge over other hidden villages. During the Second and First Shinobi Wars, Kumo had attempted kidnapping several people who possessed special abilities. Naruto knew that after the Third War, Hinata had an attempted kidnapping on her, which resulted in the death of his Ashi Hyuga, the clan head's brother. Fortunately, after that debacle, the Third Raikage had lost much of his power as people became dissatisfied with his rule. This led to the Fourth Raikage, taking the man's place. He did not know much about the Raikage, except that he apparently had no interest in bloodlines and respected strength, at least that was what he heard from Jiraiya's spy network. They made their way into a large stone tower, which was situated in the middle of the village. Naruto could easily recognize it as the Raikage Tower from its similar appearance to the Hokage Tower in Konoha, except it was made of stone and concrete. Walking inside, Naruto followed Jiraiya to the top floor where the man stopped in front of a desk. The woman who was sitting at the desk looked up at the white-haired Sennin. "Can I help you?" she asked. Jiraiya grinned. "Yes, I believe we have an appointment with the Raikage." "Name?" "Jiraiya." The woman looked through her notebook as she searched for the name, eventually finding it. Nodding to him, she went over to the door and knocked on it. "Raikage-sama, Jiraiya is here." "Send him in." The woman opened the door as Jiraiya and Naruto walked in, though not before the Toad Sennin tossed the young woman a wink, which said woman ignored as she went back to her desk. Naruto took a look around the room and noticed it was pretty bland. There was not much around that really caught his interest aside from the few posters with weights on them. "Ah. Jiraiya-sama, I have been expecting you." Naruto turned his attention to see a rather large man getting up from behind the desk with what looked like a dumbbell in his hand, which was promptly dropped, causing several cracks to appear in the stone floor. It was a very large, muscular man with slicked back white hair and a small mustache. He was wearing his cage hat and robe without a shirt underneath, allowing others to see his Hulk-like physique. Each wrist had a gold bracelet with protrusions sticking out of them. It was easy for Naruto to tell that the man was a taijutsu specialist, one who most likely used his large frame to smash up and overpower his enemies. "And this is Naruto." Naruto blinked as he turned his attention to the conversation that had apparently been taking place. He looked at the Raikage with unflinching blue eyes as the man studied him. For just a moment the Raikage could have sworn it was another spiky-haired blonde who was looking at him with those same eyes. There had only ever been one man who had the look Naruto had. The resemblance is uncanny as well. I wonder if he shook the thoughts away. After a few moments, A grinned. "It's nice to meet you, kid." The Raikage stuck out his hand, which Naruto took without hesitation. Naruto soon found out that the man had a very firm grip. Deciding he was not one to be outdone, Naruto used his own strength, which he had taken to enhancing along with his speed. He squeezed the Raikage's hand hard enough to let the man know he also had a great deal of physical prowess, even if it did not show. "A pleasure to meet you as well, Raikage Dono," Naruto said with a feral grin. "Haha," the Raikage laughed as he felt the kid's grip, which was far stronger than he had expected it to be. "I like you, kid, you've got a firm grip. That shows you're strong." Naruto grinned. "I've always been told I have more brawns than brains. Besides, who needs to think when you can just smash enemy shinobi right through a wall? Action and power are what shinobi respect the most." The Raikage chuckled as he went behind his desk and pulled out a small box. "You know what, you're exactly right. I like you, and because of that I'm going to give you these." He held out a box of protein bars. Naruto blinked as he looked at the box of protein bars, unsure of what to do. He looked up at the Raikage to see the man looking expectantly and realized this was most likely the man's way of showing respect. "Thank you, Raikage Dono," Naruto replied as he took the box. "These will help increase my physical performance and training greatly." "Ha. It's no problem, kid," the Raikage said before turning to Jiraiya. "I have a hotel for the two of you already prepared." He handed Jiraiya a letter with directions to the hotel. Jiraiya nodded in thanks before turning to Naruto and handing him the directions. "I have some business to discuss with Raikage Dono. I want you to go to the hotel. You can explore for a while if you want, but don't cause any trouble, okay?" Naruto sighed. "Who do you take me for, naughty sensei? If anyone's going to get in trouble, it will be you when you decide to go peeping into the hot springs." "Stupid gaki," Jiraiya mumbled. Naruto looked over at the Raikage. "I don't want to be too much trouble, but I was wondering if there were any training grounds you would be willing to let me use." The Raikage thought it over. Yes, I know of a few you could use. You can use the ones on the east side of the village, not many people go to those ones so they should be open. Naruto nodded his head and left. As soon as the blonde was gone, the atmosphere shifted as the two left in the room took on a more serious expression. So what do you know about Akatsuki? Asked Jiraiya. Vegito swore to herself as she made her way to the training ground, where she had been told the person she had been assigned to watch most likely was. She could not understand why she was the one doing this. There were other people who could do just as well with such an assignment. She should be undertaking more dangerous tasks than this, things like assassinations and defeating powerful ninja. She was the Nibi Jinchuuriki for Kami's sake. Yet the Raikage had been rather adamant that she be the one to watch over this boy, who was apparently very important, though the Raikage refused to mention why. Flashback. You can't be serious, Raikage-sama. Yujito said in disbelief, you want me to babysit some brat from another village? Anyone could easily do such a task, why not assign it to Team Samui? Hell, even just one of them should be more than adequate for this mission. The Raikage frowned. He knew the reason Yujito did not want to be stuck on such a mission. Unlike his brother Killer Bee, the young blonde woman was not nearly as respected. While a few of the civilians of Kumo hailed her as a hero, they still tended to remain weary of her, often keeping away for the most part. Add on that many of the shinobi resented her for her ability and Jinchuuriki status, as well as the fact that some of the members on the council disliked her, and A could see why she wanted to prove herself. Every day Yujito tried as hard as she could to move out of Bee's shadow and become respected by her ninja peers and the people of this village. Yujito, this is quite possibly one of the most important missions I will ever assign you or anyone else, the Raikage said in a serious voice. This seemed to catch the young woman by surprise for a moment before her face went back to a small scowl. What's so special about this kid anyway? She asked. The Raikage laughed. There is quite a bit that is special about him. If you complete this mission, I will share it with you. Flashback end. Not only had the Raikage been extremely vague on what made this boy so important, he also would not let anyone else but her take it. Finally, she reached the training ground and found herself with a front row seat to an impressive sight. The person she had been assigned to watch was indeed there, however he was doing an exercise that the young woman was sure would even make the Raikage and his brother think twice about trying. The man, a young blonde, was currently balancing on a kunai with one finger as he did several one-armed push-ups. Sticking to his body were several decently sized rocks that blonde was no doubt using chakra to keep in place. Balanced on his feet were two large 4-foot boulders, one for each foot. He was currently blindfolded with Hidia 8 over his eyes, while several Bushins of some kind were standing around him in a circle. The boy was only wearing a pair of pants as he worked, allowing Yujito to see a physique that, while not large like A's or Kurabi's, was extremely well defined. It was lithe, firm and reminded her of a panther or some kind of powerful predator, no doubt his body designed for a combination of intense speed and strength. She could see the ripple of his muscles every time the young man would move, watching him caused an unusual heat to rise to her cheeks. He's quite an impressive specimen, isn't he, kitten? Nibi? The one and only kitten was the answer she received through her mind. Back to the topic, that young Tom is quite an impressive and handsome young man, don't you think? Well, you should go talk to him, then once you two are acquainted, take him to your room and… Nibi? Yujito said as a blush began to spread across her cheeks. Oh, come on, kitten, don't be such a naughty things Nazi. Nibi said, go out, talk to the man, and then ride him until UTR. I can't believe you. Yujito commented incredulously, though there was a large blush staining her cheeks and a small amount of blood trickling down her nose before she wiped it away. All you think about is naughty things, why can't you ever just give it a rest? Because you need a man in your life, kitten, you turn down men left and right. It's getting rather difficult to watch, besides just look at those muscles. Yujito immediately tuned the Nibi's perverted ranting out, though she could not keep the blush from her face. She looked back over to the young man who had switched arms. She couldn't deny that he was handsome, ridiculously so in fact. But she couldn't get herself involved with anyone, aside from the fact that she needed to work twice as hard as other ninja to get any respect. She was also a Jinchuuriki. The few men who had taken an interest in her were not into her because they liked her, but because they wanted her body and to claim they had naughty things with Kumo's famed Jinchuuriki. Bragging rights was all she was. You know that's not true, kitten, you just haven't found anyone yet. Yujito sighed but gave a mental nod, not wanting to argue with her tenant at this point. Instead, she turned her attention back to the young man. He was still going at his workout routine. As she watched, she saw the clones that were surrounding him take out several kunai and without warning started launching them at him. She was just about to yell out in warning when her fellow blonde took out his own kunai and began deflecting the attacks, even as he continued to do push-ups. The few he couldn't block, like the ones behind him, were dodged, using the boulders on his feet as a counterbalance to each other as he leaned his body from one side to the other as he dodged the kunai. In all her years Yujito had never seen anyone who had such a ridiculously dangerous training regime. She watched him for what seemed like hours, but in truth was only about 30 minutes as the man continued training. When it was done the clones dispelled and the man kicked the boulders off him and the rocks on his body dropped. Yujito watched as the man flipped himself off of the kunai, landing on his feet as he took off his hideate from around his eyes. Yujito assuming that he was going to go home and turned around to leave. Only for a hand landed on her shoulder and a voice to whisper in her ear. "And just where do you think you're going, Yujito yelped as she spun around and saw the blonde looking at her with an amused expression, her eyes widened in surprise at how fast he had gotten to her. It hadn't even been a second since she had turned, that kind of speed was something she had never seen in anyone before. Seeing as how she wasn't going to answer, Naruto took a moment to look at the young woman. He had to hold in a whistle at how beautiful she was, she might even rival May. At a guess he would have to say the woman was in her mid to late 20s and carried an aura that all serious ninja possess. Her hair was blonde much like himself, however, rather than his golden sun-kissed blonde, hers was a pale shade closer to that of the Yamanaka clan. It was tied in a long ponytail that reached her lower back, her hideate was wrapped around her head, keeping her bangs from falling into her eyes and face. She was wearing a black short-sleeved shirt with a purple piece of what looked like body armor that covered from her stomach to the middle of her watermelon. She was wearing standard black shinobi pants, a violet bandana that crossed her hips and standard black shinobi sandals. Her body was the kind he was beginning to suspect were a standard when it came to strong kunoichi. It was very lithe and agile looking, with a grace that reminded him strangely enough of a cat. Yet it still held a generous amount of curves, her legs were strong and slender, looking rather well-defined muscles, yet still retaining their femininity. Her hips were not wide, but neither were they narrow and also had nice definition. Attached to the back of her hips was a perfectly round and firm bottom. She had a slender and toned stomach that moved up into a set of perky and perfectly sized watermelon that were around a mid-D cup. Naruto looked up at her face, which was a mixture of slightly oval and heart-shaped, with two emerald green eyes, which were very feline in the way they were slightly slanted. Naruto favored her with a sly grin, "So what's a beautiful woman such as yourself doing spying on little old me? Do I think I'm going to like him, kitten?" Yujito felt her face heat up at that comment as she tried to think of something to say. I wasn't spying, I was passing through, and well you see Naruto laughed as the woman literally tripped over herself to explain what she was doing here. Naruto already guessed the Reikage had sent her to watch over him. Willinati-sensei spoke with the man. No doubt to make sure he not only stayed out of trouble, but also to see his skills, something that most hidden villages usually do when a foreign shinobi is present. Yujito's blush instantly became a scowl. What's so funny? Naruto chuckled as he waved a hand in front of his face as if toward the woman off. Sorry, it's just that I've never seen a kunoichi get so flustered. Or at least not a serious kunoichi like you obviously are. Yujito blinked, unsure whether she had just been given a compliment or an insult. Are you insulting me? Not at all, Naruto replied. I was just teasing you a little, that's all. Though I would still like to know why you were spying on me. Yujito was instantly cowed. Sorry, I was just passing through to the training field I usually use when I heard you practicing. I guess I just got caught up in watching you. Yujito's eyes widened as she realized how her words could be taken. I mean, I was watching you train. No, I mean watching your training regime, I mean. Naruto grinned at the hole she had just dug herself in, not being able to pass up such a glorious opportunity. He walked up until he was right next to her. So you got caught up watching me, I take it you like what you see then? Hidden, this one is perfect. Take him now and ride him till you howl at the mo. God damn it, Nibi, shut up. Yujito blushed as she tried to speak but could not come up with anything. That blushing soon increased as Nibi began sending images of a nude Naruto and her in various naughty sexual positions. She looked over at the blonde only to blush more as she realized not only how close he was but that his body looked even better up close. Unable to stop herself, Yujito's eyes wandered up and down the blonde man's well-toned physique. She stopped when she got to his face and noticed the knowing grin he was giving her. She looked away as another blush stained her cheeks. Why, you're a lot bolder than most, Naruto said with a foxy grin. We don't even know each other's names yet and you're already stripping me with your eyes. I wasn't. Yujito tried to deny it, yet the fact that her face was beet red took any credence she may have had away. Not knowing what else to do, she let her anger get the better of her and with a small huff began walking away. Seeing her leave, Naruto ran to catch up with her, placing a hand on her shoulder to get her to stop. Hey look, I'm sorry, Naruto apologized. I didn't mean to tease you so much. Naruto blinked as he paused and thought, well I did, but I didn't mean to make you mad. Yujito looked at him as she used the enhanced senses Nibi gave her to try and detect a lie. To her surprise she found none, and that his apology was completely genuine. She decided to offer him a small smile. It's okay, I guess, I supposed I deserved it for intruding on your training. Naruto rubbed the back of his head, not at all, I'm a foreign ninja, so it's only natural you would be curious about how I train. That reminds me, Yujito said, what was that training regime you just did? I don't think I've ever seen someone do something so insane before. Naruto gave a sheepish grin as he rubbed the back of his neck, actually it's a training exercise I set up for myself. Yujito raised an eyebrow as he continued, it's designed to make me split my attention on numerous exercises. The rocks sticking to my body are a more difficult version of the leaf sticking exercise that the academy in Konoha has, balancing myself on a kunai increases the difficulty in chakra control as well. The boulders are used as weights and balancers to keep me in balance, especially when my clones begin to toss kunai into the mix. I use push-ups to increase the physical difficulty of the exercise, and the blindfold is to increase my senses other than sight, this also helps with my spatial awareness. Yujito listened to Naruto's explanation and found herself greatly impressed with what was obviously a well-thought-out workout. It was kind of like an all-in-one extreme training routine, it would allow someone to get the maximum effect out of their exercise, while also being something one could do on the road if so desired. So anyways, Naruto said, snapping Yujito out of her thoughts. I would like to make up for my teasing you. You really don't have to. Yujito started only to be interrupted by the young blonde. I know but I want to, Naruto said as he gave her a charming smile, so I would like to make it up to you milliseconds. It's Yujito, she told him with a light blush spreading across her cheeks. Yujito, huh? That's a beautiful name, Naruto said with a smile, causing the young woman to blush again. Are you doing anything tomorrow? Yujito tilted her head as she looked thoughtful before shaking her head. No, I don't have anything particular that I'm doing tomorrow. Her job was to watch him, so she would technically not be doing anything. Why do you ask? Well, I was wondering if you would allow me to take you out to dinner tomorrow, say around 7 o'clock. For 18th time in the last hour, Yujito began to smooth out her dress as she continued to pace the room to her apartment. She could not deny that she was nervous, despite being extremely confident in her abilities as a kunoichi, she had a hard time being confident in her abilities as a woman. Not because of any problems she had with her looks, Yujito was well aware that many people in Kumo thought she was beautiful. Her problem stemmed from the fact that she had never really focused on being a woman, her duties as a ninja had always kept her occupied enough that even if people asked her, she would never be able to go out on dates and the like. The few times she had been out it was always with a small circle of friends she had, namely Killer Bee's students. You worry too much, kitten. Yujito stopped smoothing out her dress as she addressed her tenant, I've never done this before, Nibi. What happens if I do something wrong and screw this up? Yujito heard Nibi giggle in her mind, what's this? Is Yujito-chan worried about making a good impression on her date? Yujito's face flushed red, that's not it at all. I just wanted to make sure that I leave a good impression on him so that it doesn't reflect badly on Kumo. You know I'm not buying that ridiculous excuse. Yujito was about to reply when she was snapped out of her conversation by the doorbell ringing. She walked over to the door, knowing that it was most likely Naruto. Taking a deep breath, she smoothed out her dress one more time, opening the door she came out to greet Naruto, only to find all of her breath leaving her. Naruto was not in the shinobi clothing she had seen him in today or yesterday, instead he was dressed in a set of well-maintained civilian clothes. He was wearing a pair of dark brown dress shoes which were polished to a shine, for pants he had on a pair of black slacks with creases on the sides, his shirt was a black short-sleeve collared shirt with dark orange stripes running down the side of the sleeves. Yujito could see that the shirt seemed strained in certain places, mainly his pectorals and biceps, showing that while he was not overly large, he still had strong muscles. Seeing the young woman stare, Naruto grinned, so you like what you see, Yujito-chan? For several moments Yujito blinked as she tried to reboot her mental functions and decipher what Naruto said. When she did, her face began turning bright red. As she began to sputter and make excuses about why she was staring, Naruto took the time to look her over. When she was wearing her shinobi clothing, Naruto could easily tell Yujito was a beautiful woman, but with a dress on she looked absolutely stunning. Yujito was wearing a dark purple strapless dress that seemed to hug the contours of her body, showing off the luscious curves in ways her ninja clothing couldn't. The dress ended just above the knees and started just a little below the upper part of her chest, allowing Naruto a nice view of her cleavage, which seemed to be pushed up by the dress, making them even perkier than they already were. She had let her hair out of the ponytail, allowing Naruto to see it in all its glory as it hung down her back freely. It also looked like she had used some kind of special shampoo or something, because it had a brilliant shine to it and looked extremely soft. Naruto also noticed that she had just a small touch of makeup on, her lips were a light red from lipstick, and she had a small amount of purple eyeline, which brought out the beautiful and exotic look of her eyes. All in all, she was beautiful. Naruto breathed, unaware that he had spoken out loud. Yujito felt heat rise to her face at the odd tone in Naruto's voice. She put her head down so he would not see how red her cheeks were getting. Do you really think so? she asked in a low voice. Naruto blinked as he realized that he must have spoken his thoughts. He reached out with his left hand and put his thumb and forefinger under her chin. Raising it up so she could see his smile, "I have rarely met anyone who could match how beautiful you look right now." Yujito felt herself actually becoming somewhat faint from the compliment. No one had ever said something like that to her and actually meant it. The few who had, she was easily able to smell the lust coming off them. She willed herself not to pass out and took several deep breaths as she steadied her heart rate, which had been beating far faster than she had ever felt it even after her toughest training routine. Once she steadied herself, Yujito offered him a dazzling smile, which literally seemed to light up her face. "Thank you." Naruto grinned as he stuck out his arm. "Shall we?" Smiling just a little wider, Yujito wrapped her own arms around his after she closed and locked the door to her apartment. The two walked along the streets making small conversation as Yujito told Naruto the directions to her favorite sushi bar, which was where he had decided to take her to. As they walked, Naruto noticed the odd looks Yujito was getting from some of the populace. No doubt they were surprised to see her not only with a man, but in a dress of all things. It was easy for Naruto to see that the young woman was not one for dressing up. In fact, it amused him that he could still see the shopping tag on her dress, meaning either she never wore it and so forgot to take it off, or she had just bought it recently and didn't even see it. He figured it was the latter. Naruto also noticed that he seemed to be getting many glares from the males of the village. It was rather easy to see they were jealous. In the one day he had known her, it was plain to Naruto that Yujito was not really the kind of person who would go out on dates and whatnot. In fact, given how nervous she seemed, chances were good that this was her first date ever. Given how attractive the blonde woman was, he knew that at least some of the men here had probably asked her out, most likely to be turned down the moment the request for a date left their mouths. Then along comes this new guy, a foreigner no less, and in less than a day gets a date with one of the most desirable women in Kumo. It was rather easy to see why they were jealous of him. Not that he cared. They arrived at the sushi bar and made their way inside, seating themselves at 2 seats at the bar. The way Yujito moved to the seat gave Naruto a hunch that it was reserved for her, much like his own seat at the Ichiraku ramen. The thought of the ramen stand and the 2 people who were like family to him brought a smile to his face. "Boy, Kenshi-san, can I have the usual please?" Naruto watched as an old man came out of the back, wiping his hands off with a rag. The man had the same air about him that old man Tucci had. Naruto figured it must be a chef thing. "Wow, Yujito-chan, look at you all dressed up," Kenshi said with a smile as he looked between her and Naruto. "I take it you're actually on a date, nah? About time if you ask me." "Hey Kenshi," Yujito said with a small whine as her face began to heat up. Kenshi just laughed, "So one of the usual, eh? And what can I get for your date?" he asked, turning to Naruto. Naruto smiled. "I'll have the same thing she's having." Kenshi actually looked surprised before shrugging. "You must have quite the appetite if you're gonna eat that, they'll be right up." With that said, Kenshi went into the back room to get supplies to make the food. While the food was being prepared, Naruto and Yujito engaged in some conversation, telling each other about their experience as ninja. For the most part, they left out anything that could be considered delicate information, such as some of the classified missions they had gone on. Yujito normally just told her fellow blonde shinobi about the different places she visited and her time as a genin under Killer Bee's tutelage, making sure to leave out her jinchuuriki status as Naruto was a foreigner. As for Naruto himself, he regaled her in tales of his accomplishments when his team had just started, telling her about his first C-A rank mission, where they had taken on Zabuza Momoichi, and his mission to protect Koyuki Kazuhana. Yujito had to admit she was impressed that a mere team of genin had accomplished missions of that caliber, though he did have Kakashi Haddock as his sensei, so it was not too much to think such feats were possible. A few minutes after the conversation began to die down, the food arrived. Naruto was shocked to see that it was 10 servings of each dish of sushi they served here. Naruto had never seen so much sushi in his entire life. "Wow, when you said I better have an appetite, you really meant it." Kenshi laughed as he went into the back of the store again. Yujito looked at Naruto with a smirk as he stared at the incredible amounts of sushi. "If you can't eat it all, I'd be more than happy to take it off your hands." Naruto looked over at Yujito and saw the challenging look in her eyes. He gave her his patented foxy grin. "Not a chance. This will all be gone long before you can even think of sinking your paws into it," Naruto stated in a confident tone. Yujito gave him a challenging grin. "Ooh, wanna make a bet?" Jiraiya sighed as he entered the hotel room he was sharing with Naruto. It had taken a lot of effort and negotiation on his part, but he had finally convinced the Raikage to allow Killer Bee to help Naruto train in using his Bijuu's chakra. He had been forced to not only give up all the information he had on Akatsuki, but he was also forced to send Tsunade a message asking for 4 jutsu from each element to give to Kumo as payment. It had been a hassle to get Tsunade to give them up and had taken longer than he had expected because of that. Still the Toad Sennin felt it was worth the effort. He had received information that Akatsuki would begin to make their moves sometime within the next year. His apprentice, while strong, would not last in a fight with two S-class ninja without some kind of trump card. In other words, his student needed to learn to harness the Kyuubi's chakra as best he could within the next year. Moving into the bedroom, Jiraiya frowned when he noticed his apprentice was not there, figuring that he was just out practicing, since the white-haired man had not received a message via Toad summons, nor felt any spike in Naruto's chakra. The man decided to get some rest. Yujito patted Naruto on the cheek as she gave him a condescending smile. There, you should have known I would win. Really now, Naruto, that look doesn't suit you. Naruto just continued to pout. He couldn't believe he had lost in an eating contest. The only person who had ever been able to out-eat him in anything was Chaoji, and even then the Akamichi heir couldn't do it with some things like ramen. He couldn't believe that this woman had not only scarfed down her entire sushi platter, but managed to steal at least half of his as well. It was not fair. "You cheated," Naruto sniffed with his pout still in place. Yujito guffawed. "You're just upset because you lost and now owe me." At that comment, Naruto's pout disappeared and was replaced with a smile that Yujito was coming to recognize. "Speaking of owing, you never told me what it is you want from me." Yujito hummed in thought as the two got up and left the restaurant, beginning to make their way to her apartment. "I haven't decided yet," she said as she began to tap her chin. Naruto grinned as he closed a distance between them. "I've been told I give a pretty good message. If you wanted, I could do that." Naruto started as his grin became larger. "Who knows, we may even be able to make it a full body message." Yujito stumbled as a large blush spread across her face. She looked over at Naruto and opened her mouth only to close it as she could not find anything to say. After opening and closing her mouth a few more times, she just huffed and began walking again, making Naruto chuckle as he caught up. They stayed like that for a while, just walking in comfortable silence as the two went into their own thoughts. Yujito was replaying the date over in her head as they walked. The blonde woman could not help but smile as she thought of how fun it was to actually go out with someone and be seen as a woman for once, rather than a kunoichi. Throughout the entire date, Naruto had given her small subtle compliments, whether it was on her beauty or her skills didn't matter, as each were enough to make her face heat up and her heart flutter. He was the first person to see her as a woman first and a kunoichi second. While she knew the Reikage appreciated her, she also realized that he still saw her as a kunoichi and weapon. Her few friends likewise saw her as the strong kunoichi she constantly made herself out to be. Well, that was in part her own fault for not really trying to be seen as anything other than a powerful ninja. It was still nice for someone to notice another side of her that did not deal with death. She was shaken from her thought when she felt something move into her hand and give it a gentle squeeze. Looking down, Yujito saw Naruto had grabbed her hand with his own. He laced their fingers together, entwining their hands. She looked up at Naruto to see a smile on his face, causing her to blush, and she looked away. She was not sure what it was about this young man, but something about him brought her a sense of comfort she had never felt before. Not even when she was with her adoptive sister Samui did she feel this comfortable. Maybe it had something to do with his eyes, she mused to herself. She had to admit that Naruto had some of the most beautiful eyes she had ever seen. A deep and startling blue that seemed to pierce into her soul. She could probably get completely lost in those eyes for hours on end. Or perhaps it was his smile. Whenever he smiled at her, she could feel her heart rate increase and blood rush to her face. It felt as if she had just run a 200-mile marathon. Yet at the same time, that smile brought her a sense of security and made her feel safe and at peace. It was a perplexing conundrum that she just couldn't get a grasp on. "Thinking deep thoughts, Yugi-chan?" Naruto asked. Yujito turned to face him with a small blush on her cheeks at his new nickname for her. "Just thinking about things," she finished lamely. "Oh?" Naruto quirked an eyebrow at her. "What kind of things?" Well, she wasn't sure what to say. She had always been a somewhat reserved person. Even with Bee and her other friends, she would never admit to being embarrassed or unsure, and she would certainly never admit to being so taken in with someone after only knowing them for 2 days. Naruto looked at her with a gleam in his eyes. "I hope you're thinking about me and our amazing date." Yujito blushed and Naruto smiled as he continued. "Perhaps thinking about how you would like to go on another one." Yujito felt her face heat up more as she looked down at the ground. "You would go on another date with me?" Naruto smiled as the two stopped outside her apartment, turning her around to face him as he took both her hands in his. "If you would let me, I would love to take you out again." Naruto moved her hands to his lips, gently kissing each one. Yujito could not help but feel like she was on fire when she felt Naruto's lips against her skin. All of the emotions and experiences she had with Naruto were so new to her. She was unsure of how to react to him. He was so different from any of the other men who had asked her out, which was part of the reason she had agreed to his request for a date. "I would like that," she said as she looked at him with a small smile and a tint of pink on her cheeks. She was so glad Nibi was keeping silent for the moment, though she had a feeling she would be paying for that later on. Naruto grinned. "Then how about tomorrow we go out for some breakfast?" Okay, Yujito said in a low voice as she fidgeted with her keys. Maybe afterwards we could even have a spar, Naruto said as challenging gleam came to his eyes. Yujito looked up at him and grinned, I suppose we could, though I should warn you I am not considered the second strongest ninja in Kumo for nothing. In truth she had wanted to test herself against him since she had seen his training, if he was even half as strong as she thought he was, it would be a good match. I'm sure I'll be fine, I may even surprise you, Naruto said with a smile as he leaned in and gave her a small kiss on the cheek. As he walked off to his hotel, Yujito stood at the entrance to her apartment for a good while as she held a hand to the cheek Naruto had kissed. After a while of standing there she smiled as a small blush came to her features before she went inside. Moving into her room, she removed her clothing and threw them in the dirty hamper before going to the bathroom. After brushing her teeth and washing her face of the small amount of makeup she had on, Yujito moved to her bed, lying down on it with a content sigh. When she fell asleep it was with a content smile on her face. Deep within the recesses of the young woman's mind a giant two-tailed cat was grinning, she was happy for Yujito, finding someone nice to be with. It was well known that the Nibi was much more in touch with the emotions and feelings of her tenant than other Biju were with their jinchuuriki, since unlike most she was not really into violence. Nibi had grown very protective of the young woman she was sealed inside of, so knowing that Yujito was happy was definitely a good thing for the giant cat. She was also happy that she now had some serious blackmail material on the young woman, while she could not use it, she could still tease the girl mercilessly. At least she picked a good man, Nibi mused, and to think he holds the Kyuubi. I wonder what Yujito will think when she finds out, it should be amusing to see. With nothing left to watch, Nibi settled down and went to sleep, tomorrow was going to be fun for her at least. Naruto ducked under a swipe from Yujito as he tried to sweep the woman's legs out from under her. Yujito jumped over him, twisting her body as she dodged the snap kick Naruto sent her way. She landed on the ground and immediately went in with multitude of kicks, switching from high to middle to low as she tried to catch Naruto with one of them. It didn't work as the young blonde dodged or blocked all of them, catching the last one in his hands before he spun her around and threw her, thrusting out his hands and grabbing her legs with chakra strings. Naruto pulled her to the ground. Yujito landed on her back with a grunt, looking up she was forced to roll out of the way as Naruto sent a punch for her head. As she rolled she pushed up with one hand, flipping herself back onto her feet. As soon as she got back to her feet Naruto was right in front of her, Yujito dodged the punch sent to her face. Sidestepping the next punch she grabbed his arm and pulled him into a kick, only for Naruto to bring up a knee as he blocked. Yujito jumped away to gain some distance and reassess her opponent. They had been going at it for about an hour now, and Yujito was constantly finding herself impressed with the young man's ability. She realized that like her own style, his relied on speed and capitulating on weak points in one's guard, however unlike her style, has also used his great strength to maximum efficiency. Where she would usually go with grapples and claw swipes which were meant to be combined with Nibi's chakra, Naruto used joints, pressure points, nerves and any weak point on a person to deal as much damage as possible as quickly as possible. His defense was absolutely impeccable, and Yujito had been unable to find a way around his guard. Not only that, but whenever she tried get him into a grapple hold, he would break free with an amazing degree of flexibility. His stamina was also something to be desired, even with Nibi sealed in her she was starting to have problems keeping up. Deciding to try a different approach, Yujito began to run around Naruto, launching kunai at the blonde as she circled him. Naruto took out two of his own kunai and began to block and dodge the weapons, weaving through them with a minimal amount of movement. Yujito shot at him with a burst of speed, aiming a punch at Naruto's head. Tilting his head to the side, Naruto thrust an open palm at Yujito's solar plexus. He connected, but rather than flying away from the hit, Yujito grabbed his arm, keeping them together. She gave Naruto a grin, Katsu. Naruto's eyes widened just as Yujito exploded in a shower of electricity, appearing a little ways from the explosion. Yujito waited for it to end. When it did, she walked up to him to make sure he was alright. She found Naruto completely unconscious with several burns where the electricity hit him hardest. Yujito instantly felt bad about hurting him this much during a spar. She crouched down to check on him only for Naruto to disappear in a puff of smoke. Before she could even widen her eyes, Yujito felt a kunai at her neck. That was a good tactic, Naruto said from behind her. It would have worked on most other people. It didn't seem to work on you, Yujito said as she turned her head to look at him. When did you switch with a Bushin? Naruto grinned at her. The moment you created and switched with your own Bushin. Seeing Yujito's eyes widen in slight shock, Naruto explained further. Raiden is one of my most powerful elements. I sensed the Raiden chakra as soon as you began to channel it. It didn't take a genius to guess what you were making. I created my own Bushin as soon as I realized what you were doing, then when yours came at me I Karawimi'd with it. Yujito nodded in understanding at what was one of the more subtle tactics a shinobi could use. She herself had used Karawimi with a Bushin to deceive her enemies on many occasions. Still, to be able to sense when she created her clone and plan accordingly was nothing short of impressive. She doubted even Reikage-sama had mastered his Raiten element to the point where he could sense the use of it in others. "You really are good, I'm impressed," Yujito said with a smile as she took the hand Naruto had just offered her and pulled herself up. Naruto pulled her up and grinned, "Why thank you, you're pretty good yourself." Before anything more could be said, Naruto felt something land on his head. Looking up, he saw that it was one of the messenger toads he and Jiraiya used. "Yo, Jiraiya wants you to head back to the hotel," it said before disappearing in a puff of smoke. Naruto closed his eyes and sighed. He didn't really want to leave right now. He was having far too much fun, but he supposed the old pervert had some kind of reason for wanting him there. He turned to Yujito, "It looks like I have to head over to see what naughty sensei wants from me." Yujito giggled at Naruto's nickname for his sensei. "That's fine, I should probably report to the Reikage anyway. I had fun sparring with you, we should do it again sometime." "Of course," Naruto said with a smile, "but only if you let me take you out to dinner again." Yujito blushed. "That's fine," she said, having enjoyed going out with him last time, she certainly would not mind having him take her out again. "I had fun going out with you last night, so." Naruto gave her a grin. "I'm glad, if possible perhaps we could go out again tonight, say same time." Yujito nodded. "Tonight sounds good." "Alright then, I guess I'll see you later," Naruto said as he began to walk, tossing a small wave over his shoulder. "Suu, are you regretting this assignment now, kitten?" Yujito flushed red. "Well, you seem to be getting quite close to that young man." Nibi's voice leaked amusement. "Not that I could blame you. If I had the choice I would have been riding him hard the moment I." "Nibi?" Yujito yelled in her mind, trying to get her perverted tenant to shut up. It didn't work, and the rest of the way to the Reikage Tower was spent trying not to blush or pass out from a nosebleed as Nibi began sending images of her and Naruto nude together. Naruto entered his apartment to find Jiraiya looking at him with a grin. "You know, when I saw that you hadn't come to hotel last night I was worried." The man's grin turned lecherous, causing Naruto to groan as he knew what was coming. "To think that my apprentice has not only stolen the heart of that hot red-headed Mizukage, but also a hot blonde Kunoichi of Kumo." He began to sniff as he wiped fake tears from his eyes. "I'm so proud." Naruto glared at the man as he sat across from him. "You better pray to Kami that I don't find you spying on me when I'm with a woman, naughty sensei, or I'll give you a Rasengan enema." Jiraiya just laughed him off. If he was willing to risk life and limb to peek on Tsunade, there was no way his apprentice could stop him, no matter how strong he got. "That's a good one, Gaki, so anyway I need you to get ready." Naruto stopped glaring at his sensei and tilted his head to the side as he looked at the man. He was tempted to ask what the man wanted him to get ready for. But he knew Jiraiya well enough to know he would just give a half-assed explanation or not tell him at all. Sighing, Naruto went to the bathroom where took a quick shower to clean the grime and dirt he had gotten from his spar with Yujito off. Finishing up, Naruto changed into his standard shinobi clothes with his cloak thrown over them. Finishing up, he walked back into the living room. "Alright, I'm ready, so where do we need to be, naughty sensei?" Jiraiya grunted as he got to his feet. "We have a meeting with the Reikage, come on, we don't want to be late." Yujito stood at attention as she finished giving her report on what she had discovered about one Naruto Uzumaki so far. To say the Reikage was impressed was akin to saying that Tsunade liked to drink or Orochimaru had a small thing for boys. Meaning big understatement, he wasn't just impressed about the boy's skills in combat either. Yujito had, much to her embarrassment, been forced to tell about her date with Naruto, since he had heard about it from some of the people in the village on his way here. That the young man could actually get Yujito to do something so out of character for her was impressive. He absently wondered if he could use this to form some kind of alliance between Konoha and Kumo. It would be hard given the tensions between the two nations that had risen since the Hyuga incident years ago, when the third Reikage tried to kidnap the heiress of the Hyuga clan. Still, it could work. "Excellent job, Yujito," I said after a moment. "Tell me, what would you rate his level of skills at?" Yujito thought about it for a moment as she went through the skill Naruto had shown her. "I can't say for certain since I doubt I saw all of his abilities, but if I had to guess I would say about elite Jonin to low Kage level." He scratched his chin as he thought about that. In truth, he was not surprised that Naruto was around that level. His spies from Kiri had just gotten back and given him some interesting information. "I see I'm going to be giving you a new assignment just as soon as." He was interrupted by a knock on the door. "Come in." The door opened and in walked Jiraiya and Naruto. As the two entered, Naruto spotted Yujito and waved to her. Yujito blushed a bit as she waved back. Of course, this interaction did not go unnoticed by Jiraiya. "Ho, so this is the woman I was told you were spending time with. I must say you have fine taste, Naruto, she is quite the looker." Yujito felt a mixture of embarrassment and anger at Jiraiya's blatant stare, which she knew from previous experiencing with perverts like him, that he was stripping her clothing with his eyes. She was just about to act when Naruto beat her to it, smashing his fist into Jiraiya's face and sending him into a wall. Hiro-sensei, I swear to Kami, if you keep this up I'm going to shove a Rasengan so far up your ass you won't be sitting straight for a month. As Jiraiya pried himself from the wall grumbling about disrespectful brats not letting a man get his looks in, it decided to move on. Despite how amusing this is, I believe we should move on, now, as I was telling Yujito here. He was interrupted again, this time by a crash as someone bust through his door. Have no fear, Killer B is here. Yo. The Raikage said in a dangerous voice as his eyebrow twitched, what have I told you about breaking in without knocking first? Killer B shrugged, don't remember yo. I think it was something about making a mess in your nest. Before anything else could be said, Yujito kicked Killer B in the back of the head, damn it B. How many times have I told you to stop with that stupid rapping? As Naruto watched a man known as Killer B shrug off Yujito's kick like it was nothing, he used the time the two spent arguing to analyze the man. B looked very similar in appearance to the Raikage, making Naruto assume that they were related, most likely brothers given their close age. On his right shoulder was a tattoo that said Tetsu, iron, and on his left cheek was a tattoo of a bull's horn. He had oval-shaped glasses and a white Hidia on his head. He had a white one-strap over one shoulder flak jacket, a red rope tied around his waist, white handbands, and a white scarf around his neck. Naruto also noticed that he had 7 swords on his back, making Naruto wonder what he did with them all. Yujito said as they got over the argument they were having, I am assigning you to a new mission. You're to help Naruto Uzumaki with his training. Yujito felt her eyes widen in surprise, this was not what she had expected to hear. Naruto, from what she had seen, was already fairly skilled, in fact she was almost positive that in terms of raw ability, he had more talent than her. Excuse me Raikage-sama, but why do we need to train Naruto-kun, he already seems to be very strong. It was only after she saw the look she was receiving that she realized what she had said. Currently both A and B were looking at her with a mixture of surprise and amusement. Jiraiya was giving perverted giggles, and he had taken out a notebook that he began writing in, occasionally muttering about blonde Gaki's being a gold mine. However, it was Naruto's reaction that was causing her to blush. In a burst of speed he appeared behind her with a large grin planted on his face and wrapped an arm around her waist as he pulled her back into his chest. So it's Naruto-kun now, eh? Naruto mused with a growing grin, I didn't realize you felt so close to me already, Yugi-chan. As Yujito felt her embarrassment reach a peak as Nibi decided to add her own comment, kitten, I'm so proud of you. Remember to give me lots and lots of little ones with this young man. I didn't, what I meant was. Naruto made a mock hurt face, so you don't like me, Yugi-chan. He made some sniffling noises and used the Inukoinu Mitsuki no Jutsu, puppy dog eyes jutsu, on her. Yujito's eyes widened, no. Of course I do, she paused once again realizing what she was saying and felt herself becoming even more embarrassed. She literally felt her face burning, which got worse when Killer B walked up and gave Naruto a grin. So you're Yujito's boyfriend, eh? You must be something to get this kitty to play. Hearing B's rap, Yujito became irate again. As soon as Naruto let her go, she lunged at the large man. Naruto and the others watched with some amusement as Yujito proceeded to kick Killer B in the face, only for him to get back up a moment later, as if nothing had ever happened. Now then, if you two are done, the Raikage said, I did not mean help teach Naruto-san here techniques, I want you to help him with his Biju. What? Yujito asked with wide eyes as she looked at Naruto, did the Raikage pretty much just say that Naruto was a jinchuuriki? She looked at the others around the room, none of them seemed surprised by that statement. Not even Killer B, and she was sure he had not been told previously, he hadn't even met Naruto. You're a jinchuuriki? She asked as she looked at Naruto. You didn't know that, Yujito? Question B, he's the 9, yo. Why didn't your Biju let you in? That Nibi wouldn't tell you is such a sin. Nibi, why didn't you tell me Naruto-kun was a jinchuuriki? Well you see, kitten, Nibi said in a nervous voice. Nibi. Wah. I'm sorry kitten, it just slipped my mind, honest. Are you alright, Yugi-chan? Asked Naruto, watching the various emotions play across her face. There were several ranging from surprise, confusion and anger. Are you mad that I didn't tell you? Yujito snapped out of her thoughts when she heard what Naruto said, no, of course I'm not mad at you. You're not a shinobi of this village, so I can understand why you wouldn't tell me. We've only known each other for 2 days, so it's not like I expected to know all of your secrets. Naruto smiled at her, pleased to know that she wasn't upset at him. Thank you, Yugi-chan. Yujito blushed, you're welcome. We will be talking about you not telling me something as important as this later. Yujito smiled when she heard a gulp in her mind, so if we're going to be teaching Naruto-kun to control his Biju, why am I here? Killer B is a much better person to teach than me, she admitted. While she could control her Biju's power completely, hers was only the 2 tails. Kurabi not only had the 8 tails, but was also called the perfect vessel for a reason. Because while we live with our Biju in harmony, the Kyuubi prefers to harm many. Yujito's sweat dropped, okay, that was bad even for you, Kurabi. Killer B looked somewhat depressed. I can't believe you're dissing on my rhymes, Yujito, after all I've done for you, yo. Naruto found himself sweat dropping as Yujito kicked him in the head again. Naruto opened his eyes to find himself back inside his mindscape. Under Kurabi's instruction, he was coming here to try and get the Kyuubi to cooperate. It had been a long time since he had last entered his mind. In fact, he had not been here since he had learned the Kuchiyas no Jutsu during the Chunin selection exams. He was pleasantly surprised to see the place looked a little better than the last time he was here. While it was still a sore, the walls that were once chipped and cracked were now more pristine. The water that had once been knee-deep on the floor was gone. The place looked much better, though it was still a sore. Following the red pipe, Naruto once again came upon the side of a large cage. In the middle of the cage was a single piece of paper with a kanji for seal. As Naruto walked up to the bars, two large blood-red eyes with black slits running down the middle opened up. It's been a long time since you've come here, boy. The creature revealed itself as it walked up to the cage. It was a giant fox, with 9 red tails swishing around behind it. "Kyuubi," Naruto said as he stared at the fox with an impassive face. The fox gave him a massive grin filled with malice. "What's this?" "No, hello, how are you?" "I must admit to feeling a little hurt." "Cut the crap," Naruto said with a scowl, "you know why I'm here. You wish to use my chakra," the fox said as it looked at him. "However, I don't really feel like giving it to you." Kyuubi gave Naruto another grin. "Tell me, little ninja, why should I, the greatest of the Biju, give you my chakra?" Naruto forced himself to remain calm. He knew Kyuubi's game, and getting angry at the fox would only be playing into its hands. "You know why you should lend me your chakra. We both know that if I die, you die." Naruto gave the fox a small grin. "Whether we like it or not, we need each other to survive. Right now there are 9 S-class criminals after your power. If they capture me, they will suck you out and seal you into a statue for whatever their purpose is. Is that something you want?" Kyuubi gave a hum of thought. "Well, I don't quite like the idea of being sealed into a statue." It looked at Naruto, "And I must admit you have gotten stronger." "What's this?" Naruto asked with mock sarcasm. "Did I just hear respect in the great Kyuubi no Kitsune's voice? Don't patronize me, human." Kyuubi roared at Naruto, causing the blonde's hair to fly out of his face. "I am the Kyuubi no Kitsune, the most powerful of the Biju. A mere mortal like you is nothing more than an ant to me." Naruto held up his hands in a pacifying gesture. "Easy there, Fuzzy, I was just surprised, that's all." Kyuubi glared at him for the fuzzy comment but seemed to let it slide for now. "So how about it? You gonna work with me?" "Very well," Kyuubi grumbled, "but do not think that this means I in any way like you. The only reason I am doing this is because I would rather not be sealed in a statue." "The feeling's mutual, Kyuubi," Naruto said as he disappeared. Kyuubi stared at the spot where Naruto had been for a while before grumbling as it laid down, deciding to get more shut-eye. Outside the seal, Yujito and Killer B were watching Naruto carefully to make sure that Kyuubi didn't take over. They were currently at B's home in the Valley of Clouds and Lightning, a place that was isolated enough that if Naruto went berserk, they could subdue him without causing any casualties. As they watched Naruto, red chakra began to pour out of his Tenketsu points. While neither would admit it, they had never felt such a vile chakra before, even from their own Biju. The chakra began to take shape, giving Naruto a pair of fox ears, as what Killer B called the Biju shroud appeared. The tail soon began to form behind Naruto. As it did, his features became more demonic, with his nails lengthening into claws, his whiskers marks got thicker, and his eyelids became black, making it look like he was wearing eyeliner. A few minutes after that, a second tail began to form as Naruto grit his teeth. After a while, when it seemed no more tails would form, Naruto opened his eyes, revealing blood-red pupils with black slits running down the middle. Killer B nodded. "So 2 tails is your max, little man. Let's have you fight Yujito and see where you stand." Yujito's eye twitched at the bad rap, but she ignored it as she walked over to the opposite side of Naruto. Stopping a few feet away, she looked at the blonde shinobi. "Are you ready?" she asked as she got into her own stance. She began channeling Nibi's chakra, forming a shroud much more quickly than Naruto did and moving to up to 2 tails. Naruto nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be," he said in a guttural and more demonic sounding voice. "Remember, you have to maintain your tails, otherwise this exercise fails, yo." "Shut up, Kurabi." Killer B sighed at the fact that Yujito never seemed to appreciate his rapping. Getting over it, he held his hand out and made a cutting motion. "Start the fight, yo, let's see a show." Naruto and Yujito ran at each other and clashed with a resounding boom. 6 months later. Naruto ducked under a claw swipe as he slid into Yujito's guard, hitting her multiple times on the lower ribs and stomach before kicking her away. Yujito managed to flip herself through the air before skidding to a halt on the ground and falling to her knees. She winced as she tried to get up. That last attack had completely knocked the air from her and cracked several ribs, though she could feel Nibi healing her. She lifted her head as Naruto sat down next to her. "You're getting better," Naruto stated. Yujito grunted. "I still can't hit you." Naruto laughed, the warmth in his tone relaxing her. True, but that's because I'm not letting you use Nibi's chakra today like you normally do when we spar. Yujito said nothing as she got into a more comfortable position, only to moan when Naruto began to massage her back and shoulders, channeling chakra to his hands increasing the sensation. Naruto had been here for about 6 months, working on being able to better utilize Kyuubi's chakra with the help of Yujito and Killer Bee. During this time he had met the members of Team Samui, which Naruto learned were students of Bees. Carrie, a young dark-skinned woman with red hair and yellow eyes, she wore a long black battle kimono with a modified armored sword holster. Amoy, a man with dark skin, light yellow hair and red eyes, wore black Anbu clothing with white bandages around the ankles and sword holster like Carrie's. You could usually find him with a lollipop in his mouth. The last member of Team Samui who was also their leader was Samui Nai, Yujito's older sister. She had short blonde hair that went down to her shoulders, and she wore a revealing skirt with a shirt and had a body comparable to that of Tsunade, since she had fair skin, blonde hair, and very large watermelon. She also wore what appeared to be a sheath strapped horizontally across her lower back. They were an odd group to say the least. Amoy and Carrie were always arguing with each other about one thing or another. Amoy would usually overthink things, which seemed to piss off Carrie who would hit him. Samui was fairly quiet and would often talk about how much her back hurt. Apparently her watermelon were so large that her frame could not support them. Naruto had decided to help her out by giving her a back message, which had seemed to endear the woman to him, as she would often come by his hotel after a mission to get one. Though after Jiraiya had caught them and began crying about how his precious student had gotten 2 hot blonde Kumo girls, Naruto had gone to her place instead. Of course this did not sit well with Yujito, and she had gotten very pissed when she saw Naruto giving the large-chested woman a back rub. Of course Yujito refused to say why it bothered her so much, but Naruto knew the reason and had easily made it up to the young blonde woman by making her sushi. When not training with Killer Bee, most of his time he had spent with Yujito, who had shown Naruto many of her favorite spots when she wanted to be alone or at least away from some of the more ignorant shinobi who were jealous of her status, or when the villagers stared at her with lust. Naruto had also, much to the secret delight of the beautiful blonde, taken her on several more dates. Naruto had become very protective of Yujito over the last 6 months as well, something Jiraiya had made a point to tease him about constantly, though he stopped when Naruto actually went through on his promise and gave him a Rasengan enema that sent him flying out of Kumo. During one of the dates he took her on, Naruto had overheard 2 low-ranking ninja talking about how they were jealous and wished they could get in the pants of the demon. Naruto had taken them outside and made an example out of them, showing what happens when someone disrespects his friends by literally removing the appendage that made them male. After that no one had dared talk bad about Yujito in his presence, though Naruto found it odd that no one seemed to have a problem with B, yet several ninja and civilians seemed to have an issue with Yujito. Naruto had been reprimanded by A after that incident, though he got the feeling that the man was actually grateful. Also it seemed that Jiraiya had also become weary of him afterwards, since Naruto had threatened the man with castration should he catch Jiraiya spying on him and Yujito. Speaking of A, Naruto had sparred with the man a few times and had to admit he was extremely impressed. While not as fast as him or as varied in the ninja arts, he was definitely powerful and completely outclassed him in Taijutsu. Especially when A used the Raiten no Yoroi, lightning armor, which allowed the bulky raikage speed and strength far superior to Naruto. The blonde had learned that the jutsu sped up a person's neural synapses, increasing their speed, strength and reflexes by a factor of 4. The only way the blonde could keep up with him was when Naruto used Kyuubi's chakra, even then it was hard since A had sparred with Killer Bee many times. He could have used the Hiraishin of course, but he did not want to draw attention to himself. Naruto himself had earned the man's respect after their first spar and had been asked to have one again with him, as well as an arm wrestling match. He felt Yujito start to sway and realized that if he did not stop she would fall asleep. Taking his hands off her back, Naruto used his water affinity to draw in the moisture from the air before freezing it into a wall, which he leaned against, pulling Yujito with him and wrapping his arms around her waist. Even if she had wanted to, Yujito doubted she could have resisted. Her body felt like it had been turned into a pile of warm goop by Naruto's magic hands. With a slight blush she wondered what else he could do with his hands. They stayed like that for about 15 minutes before Naruto broke the silence. "Iro-sensei and I are going to be leaving tomorrow." Yujito, who had wiggled onto her side, looked up at him in surprise and sadness. "So soon?" she asked. "I mean, you've only been here for 6 months and I thought that." Well, she trailed off. How could she tell him how she felt? She could not even admit it to herself. She was broken from her thoughts when Naruto lifted her face to meet his, unfortunately naughty sensei's, saying, "It's time to move on. I've learned a lot while I was here, and even though I can't fully control Kyuubi's chakra, the old pervert feels it's enough for now. We've spent all the time we can here." "I understand," Yujito said. Her voice was far softer than normal. Naruto tightened his hold on her waist, bringing her closer to him as he put his forehead against hers. "Don't think that this is the last time we will see each other, Yujito-chan," Naruto said in a warm and compassionate voice. Naruto sat up straight as he reached into his cloak and pulled out one of the oddest kunai that Yujito had ever seen. It was several inches bigger than standard kunai and had strange symbols that Yujito recognized as seals along the handle. It had a tri-pronged blade rather than one blade. "What's this?" she asked as Naruto handed her the kunai. "That is how you will be able to see me again. Whenever you are in need of help or want someone to talk to, just throw that kunai into a wall and I will come." Seeing Yujito's confused look, he decided to elaborate. "That kunai is the secret to one of the most powerful jutsu in the world and was what gave my father his nickname." It took a second to realize what he was talking about. Naruto had confidentially told her who his parents were, so she knew he was the son of Thikiroi Senku, though Naruto had a sneaking suspicion that A also knew this. When she figured out what this kunai was for, her eyes widened. "Harassing," she breathed out. She looked at the kunai in awe. This was for the technique that had won the Third Great Ninja War. The jutsu that created fear amongst Iwa and gave a man the first and only ever SS rank in the bingo books. And Naruto was giving it to her, essentially telling her that he would always be there for her. "Now there are some rules that you need to follow when using this," Naruto said, getting her attention. "The most important rule is that you cannot use this around others. I don't want to end up starting a war with Iwa because of this, so the less people who know the better. Also, when using it, just to limit it to when you really need me, like you are in danger. You can also use it once every 2 weeks, just so we can see each other. Because of my duties I may not always be able to come. If you just use it whenever you feel like it, this will ensure that I come every time you use it." Yujito nodded as she looked at him. "Thank you, Naruto-kun." Naruto ears perked as a sly grin crossed his face. "There's no need to thank me, Yugi-chan. After all, being able to spend time with a woman as beautiful as you is always a pleasure." Yujito blushed. "Thank you, I've always found it pleasurable to be with you as well." Her eyes widened and her face heated up as she realized how her words could be taken. "I mean, I always found your company to be." Her rambling was stopped as Naruto put a finger to her lips. "No need to get so flustered, I was only teasing." Yujito puffed out her cheeks as she pouted, before they both burst out laughing. When the laughter died down, Yujito did something that she probably would have never done had she thought about it. Leaning into him, she claimed his mouth with her own. Naruto, well surprised that she had actually taken the imitative, recovered admirably and kissed back. Deciding not to be outdone, he wrapped his arms around her waist and pulled her close. Gently snaking his tongue into her mouth, causing the young woman to let out a moan, he began to explore. He was actually surprised that she did not taste like sushi, considering how much of the stuff she ate. Her mouth tasted sweet, reminding him of vanilla ice cream. He decided not to think about it and just enjoyed the feeling as Yujito began to use her own tongue in their little duel. Taking her by surprise, Naruto wrapped his own tongue around hers and pulled it into his mouth, allowing her to explore. At first she only probed him tentatively. She had never actually kissed anyone before, so she was not sure what to do. With a little prodding from Naruto, however, she soon began to feel her way around with vigor. She found out that Naruto tasted a lot like ramen, much to her amusement. As she continued tasting, her fellow blonde Yujito felt as light as a feather. Her stomach was doing flip-flops, and there was an intense heat that she had never felt before as she was swept away by the sensations and taste of Naruto. It was everything she had ever imagined a kiss would be. Despite being a strong and powerful kunoichi who hated being dependent on others, she still had the same desire to eventually find love, no matter how much she would try to deny it. Deciding to take this elsewhere, Naruto picked Yujito up bridal style and disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Naruto and Jiraiya were at the gate about to leave. Naruto smiled as all the friends he had made while here stood in front of him, Amoy, Kari and Samui standing next to their sensei, the Hachibi Jinchuuriki Killer Bee. But the Raikage was standing a little off to the side with a smirk on his face as he looked over at Yujito, who was right in front of Naruto, a slight limp in her walk that the others noticed, especially Jiraiya, who was going to tease the gaki for this later. Yujito herself had that afterglow that the woman seemed to get after naughty things as she stood there, though there was also a slight melancholic look on her face. It was rather easy for everyone to see how much the young woman would miss Naruto. He had done more for her and spent more time with her than anyone besides A and B. "So I guess this is it?" Yujito asked, trying to be stoic. Naruto smiled as he cupped her left cheek, rubbing his thumb along the smooth skin. "Yeah, but it won't be the last time you see me, so I wouldn't worry too much. You're gonna have to come back soon to help me make some tunes, yo." Naruto blinked as Killer Bee came up to him and started rapping again. He shook his head as he chuckled. "Sorry, but I don't think I can help you rap or improve your rap. But if you need a good fight, look me up." Bee grinned. "That's all I need, yo. Just give me a fight and I'll do things right, fool." "Shut up, Bee." Yujito jumped up and kicked him in the head, causing everyone to chuckle. I do hope you'll come back soon, Samui said as Amoy and Carrie came up to him. I'm going to miss your messages, she rubbed her neck in emphasis. Yujito growled at her, but Naruto just laughed. Then I'll be sure to visit when I can, wouldn't want you to get all cramped up and unable to even perform your duty as a kunoichi, would we? Amoy came up to him and did something no one would have expected. Reaching into his bag, he pulled out a sucker and handed it to Naruto. I figured you could use one for the road, he said as Naruto took it. Thanks, Naruto said as he unwrapped the sucker, putting it in his mouth. How come you give him a sucker but not me? Carrie asked with her hands on her hips. She had asked Amoy for suckers on numerous occasions, but he would never give her one. Because Amoy rubbed the back of his head, you're always so violent and loud, why can't you be quieter like our big-breasted teammate? Perhaps if you. He was cut off as Carrie smashed her fist into his face, sending the man flying, asshole. He shook his head as he moved over and shook Naruto's hand. Make sure you come back to visit, I could use another spar soon, perhaps you'd even be able to compete with me in an arm wrestling match again. Naruto chuckled, of course. As soon as he let go of the Raikage's hand, Yujito came up and glomped him, nearly knocking the boy off balance as he was forced to readjust his footing. Naruto smiled as he wrapped his arms around the blonde woman, rubbing her back in a soothing manner. Hey, come on now, I told you this won't be the last time you see me. Whenever you need me, just draw my kunai. I know, Yujito said as she held him tighter. Make sure you're careful, the last thing I need is for my fiancé to go and get himself killed, she said in a small whisper. Naruto laughed as he kissed Yujito on the head. You should know I'm always careful. Yujito said, looking up with a deadpan expression, not believing that for a second. That's why you tried fighting both B and Raikage-sama at the same time, right? Naruto looked sheepish. Well, I just wanted to make sure I could fight two powerful ninja at the same time, you know, to get ready for when I face Akatsuki. Naruto turned his head away from her, getting nervous from the way she was staring straight through him. Come on, Gaki, you can make kissy face with your girlfriend when you come back. Jiraiya yelled, already walking away. I'm coming, naughty sensei. Kami, can't I even say goodbye? He looked back at everyone and gave them a two-fingered salute. I'll see you guys around. He took off at a quick jog to catch up to Jiraiya. I wouldn't worry too much about that young man, Killer B said as he put a hand on Yujito's shoulder. He's not the type to go and kick the can. Yo. B, shut up. Yujito said as she sent another kick at his head. The Hichibi Jinchuuriki chuckled as he stood up and walked off. Yujito looked back out where Naruto had been for a second before leaving as well. Yujito frowned as she walked around Kumo. She had been looking for Naruto for nearly 3 hours now. She was just about to give up when she heard something that made her freeze. People keep coming to hear our rhymes, we're the Jinchuuriki 8 and 9. Yujito began to rush to the source of the noise as quick as she could, praying to Kami and whatever other deities she could think of that this was not what she feared it was. When they see us rap in, the peeps gather round, everyone wants to hear our sound. Yujito turned around a corner and froze as her worst fears were confirmed. Killer B had somehow roped Naruto into rapping with him. The two were currently standing on the roof of a building. Both of them were taking turns rapping to the masses that were walking by and giving Naruto strange looks. Anger began to take over Yujito as she channeled Nibi's chakra. Naruto and Killer B stopped rapping as they heard the scream and saw a giant two-tailed demon cat that was growing larger by the minute. I think the kitty has really got mad, this seems to be bad. Naruto looked over at B. Dude, you might want to stop rapping and start running. Man, have no fear, I'm the 8 Tails Jinchuuriki here. Yo. Aya. Boom. Inside his office, A watched as the giant two-tailed cat rampaged the city and shook his head. Great, now I'm gonna have to pay for damages again. At least my assistant can't complain about it being me this time. On 100 likes part 2 will be come. For now, you guys should watch this video. So click on it, I will see you there.